is Conor Clyne. This is the New Europe Experience. So if you're new to this format, welcome. And I start off by giving a presentation here on a topic. Recently, I have changed it so that I will be giving you a little bit more of the geopolitical background to the region, especially with the war in Iran, Operation Epic Fury. We see that geopolitics, especially in terms of travel and relocation, have become more important with the developments. And then I'll have a Q&A session where you can ask your questions with regard to coming to this region, the geopolitics, lifestyle, dating, visas, all those questions that are under the umbrella of what I help my clients with. So drop your comments down below in the comment section as we go through this. You can see here on my screen your comments and questions as they come in. So my name is Conor Clyne. This is the New Europe Experience, rebranded from the former Czar Experience. I'm sitting here in Odesa on the shores of the Black Sea, and tonight's topic is going to be about the developments in Estonia. It's a country that I spent actually a lot of last winter in. I must have spent about 4 months in Estonia, wearing here the Estonian. Well, actually, this is the crest, and then I have my one Estonian top that I bought, and I did make a video about Estonia. If I don't have it down below in the description, I'll put it in later. You can find it on my channel, 5 reasons basically to come to Estonia. So it's a country I know reasonably well, because 4 months in the last, say, 15 months is a substantial amount of time. I also went to Narva, which is going to be the subject of today's presentation. Won't be too long a presentation, but it'll give you a little bit of a better idea about the Baltic region in general, whether it's a good fit for you to travel to or to maybe even relocate to, in spite of what is happening geopolitically in general in this broader region, which is known as Europe. Basically, on my channel, I help high-level men with leveraging lifestyle arbitrage to gain an advantage here in, well, gain an advantage in life, maybe even an unfair advantage in life. So on a more granular level, I help my clients with relocation, lifestyle, dating, and business in this region I've dubbed New Europe. It's basically the region between Germany and Russia. So countries like Estonia, which is the subject of tonight's presentation, and the other countries that are collectively known as the Baltic states. So we got Latvia, Lithuania also there, Poland, Moldova, Ukraine, where I am at the moment, Kazakhstan, and Romania are the countries that I have been filming in since 2022, with the Russo-Ukrainian war escalating with the invasion in 2022. So those are the countries that I deal with. I'll also give you in the Q&A section, maybe after the first part of the Q&A section, I'll give you some updates on what has been happening in the broader region, also the dichotomy that I see between the countries that I have my clients with and other countries within this umbrella term of New Europe, like in the Balkans, for example, and other parts of Central Europe. So I'll just see your questions as comments as they come in. Let me know that all is good. Okay, I see hello already from Tallinn. And let me just see here with respect to a broad overview. There has been some developments on social media with the description of a Narva's People's Republic. Now, that People's Republic term may sound familiar to you with respect to here in Ukraine, because we had a Donetsk People's Republic and a Luhansk People's Republic that suddenly appeared, not internationally recognized, back in 2014. And this was at the beginning of the Russo-Ukrainian war. Russia seized the Crimean Peninsula, and then after that, suddenly there were some separatists who declared with Russian assistance, well, basically the GRU was involved, Russian intelligence, in particular Igor Strelkov, Igor Girkin, who is sitting in a Russian prison because he's basically an opponent of Vladimir Putin these days. Well, he organized the operation, he was involved in the operation in Crimea and then subsequently in Donetsk and Luhansk. And we saw other attempts to create something similar in other parts of Ukraine. I remember there was a Buchak People's Republic that was nascent, and then I guess Ukrainian intelligence managed to crush it. That was out here in the western part of the Odesa Oblast. Buchak is a region that was in Romania prior to the Second World War, when the interbellum period anyways, it was in Romania, and culturally it's very similar to what you see in Moldova. They have the best Arabian cuisine, which is now quite popular here in a lot of restaurants in Odessa, the city. So there was suddenly on social media a description of the Buchak People's Republic. Now we see something that is quite similar in Estonia and Narva, and basically you have these social media accounts that are promoting the same talking points that were used in the information space that we saw in Donetsk and Luhansk about the oppression of Russian speakers and ethnic Russians, and declaring this People's Republic, at least virtually for now. And what does this all mean for Estonia, Narva, the town itself, and a possibility of this war that we see in Europe spreading to the Baltic region in terms of going from being what we've seen below the threshold of war so far. So remember, there was a good few months ago now, it must be over 6 months ago, drones that flew into Poland, Russian drones that were not actually charged, didn't actually have a warhead on them, but were basically probing NATO defense. We've seen a lot of times that Russian aircraft have violated, in particular, Estonian and Latvian airspace, and we've seen other provocations in the Gulf of Finland, where cables are cut at the behest of Russian interests that connect up part of the Baltic states. So these are all what are known as gray area warfare. So it's not escalated up to a kinetic confrontation, but we have seen this taking place, and maybe this is laying the groundwork for some sort of kinetic operation. So I'll give a short presentation in a minute or two. We'll start with it. And just as an overall comment, as I was saying in last week's live stream, which was about how in this new era that we're entering, geopolitics is going to become more important if you were traveling or thinking of relocating. A lot of people probably realize that when they see the images in the Gulf at the moment, all those Instagram influencers who are based in Dubai in particular, suddenly realizing that they are in one of the most volatile regions in the world, in the Middle East, but they've been living obliviously to that up until now, even though there were the warning signs before that this could potentially happen. Also, Dubai airport, I'm pretty sure, was maybe Abu Dhabi airport was hit by a drone in 2022, fired by the Houthis, I think, which are a group that is allied with Iran down in Yemen on the Red Sea. So now this is becoming more and more relevant. That's why I'm giving these geopolitical slants to some of the live streams. I've turned this into basically a Sunday show recently, where we discuss these topics that are a bit more intellectual and get down to obviously a little bit more of what is happening broader in the region, not just talking about, you know, the cost level of my flat white, or, you know, how beautiful the girls are in Odessa. It's a little bit more nuanced than these kind of superficial lifestyle reasons that normally you see in here on YouTube, for example. Even though that's all true, your money does go further here, and there are those perks. I can't deny the world famous beauty of the women of this region either. So one thing that I want to announce just before I get into the presentation is that I have developed an AI. It's called the New Europe Insider AI. Basically, I was experimenting with just putting an AI helper on my website, and then I realized that actually, hey, this thing, once I started to feed it in, is pretty powerful, and it's way better than ChatGPT. So what I am launching is an AI tool that will be based on my videos here on YouTube, also some of my premium content, a section of it, and these live streams, for example, they will be, the AI is trained on it so that it can answer your questions, not quite on the same level as if you were to hop on a consulting call with me, but it does do a lot of the work. I'm pretty impressed on it and give you a lot more of a nuanced answer than saying using a general AI, like say it's ChatGPT or Grok, whatever you use. I tested it actually just to see what my advice would be on ChatGPT, and I was a bit disappointed. It is better than nothing. Obviously, it does get some things right, but it's maybe 20-30% of the way there. And with this this AI, the New York Insider AI, gets you about, I would say, 80% of the way there. And it's a subscription model. I'm opening up to the founders. They say they're the founding members who join it at 29 euros per month as a subscription. You'll be able to hop on there. You don't have to wait until the next live stream to ask me a question. Obviously, I'm going to give you answer just a few questions here whenever these come up. If you're planning strategically about traveling to the region, dating in the region, relocating to the region, then it will be able to answer most of your questions. So we have to go to a very high strategic level or a very edge case. That is something that obviously a consulting call would be the best solution. You can also use it and then supplement it with a consulting call. So it doesn't quite replace me, but it definitely is a lot better than using a general AI, because they basically are fed a lot of rubbish from the internet and it will not give you the type of advice that you're looking for. It is better than nothing. It's better than, say, a Google search was back in the day, where you'd have to spend so much time reading and reading and reading, and it was very hard to get a succinct answer to a discrete question. But this AI is definitely a big advancement. I'm pretty impressed when I started asking it, and I needed to tweak it a little bit because it was it had certain biases the way it was interpreting some of my videos when I fed in all the training material, but it is pretty impressive. So that is something that you can find a link to down in the description, the first link there. Until Monday, which is tomorrow, midnight Eastern Standard Time, so New York time, it will be available. 29 euros per month. That's about 30, I guess about 34, $35 per month. So you'll be like having me in your back pocket. Doesn't quite replace me, but it is a huge advancement in terms of asking questions and getting high value answers to your lifestyle, dating, relocation questions for here in Ukraine. So definitely go and invest in that. I will be raising the price. It'll basically be a beta testing sequence. I'm not sure for how long we'll have that, maybe a week, to let the guys who have invested. I had already offered it on my mailing list. So once I have that phase done and we make the tweaks, then I will open it up at a higher price, and it will be that monthly subscription. If you have invested in the guides, I am not putting in on the basic tier the proprietary information about where to go exactly. That is something that will be offered presumably later on. I can just feed in that for information as a second tier. And if you have invested in the guides, then that is something that obviously I will take into account in terms of pricing. So for this basic New Europe AI, the Insider AI, then go and invest in that now, because I will be raising the price after Monday midnight Eastern Standard Time, and it is a huge development. I'm actually pretty chuffed with it. I may even, after I've finished with the beta, make a video about how to use it, because me being super impressed with it, you can't see what I saw, especially because I put a series of questions into, because I was chatting to a friend. Okay, you're interested. He's already been with me here once before, so I was saying what kind of questions, what kind of profile, and we're looking at ChatGPT, and I was like, in terms of how it interprets, even how I would advise, and in general with all the bad information that it's fed in as well about the region. And you also have to remember, ChatGPT is it's like a sycophant. It basically tries to kiss your ass all the time and if you suggest something to it, it always tells you basically that you're great, in my experience. This, when you put it into the New York Insider AI, it just gives you such a vastly superior answer, and it will definitely direct you in the right direction. So interesting development. I was super impressed by it. So if you want to have my advice 24/7 at the tip of a finger, then go grab that before the price goes up Monday, midnight, Eastern Standard Time, New York time. So let me get to today's topic, Narva. Let me set the scene. I actually went and shot a live stream there. I think it was back in January 2025. I have a link to that live stream down below. You can watch that if you want to see what it looks like. Narva, it was very snowy, it was super cold. And basically you have the river Narva on the Estonian side, so on the side that's in the European Union, that's in NATO, it's part of Estonia. You have Hermann Castle, which is like, I think, a German-built castle originally. And then you have the river Narva, you have a bridge, I think it's ironically called the Friendship Bridge, that then goes over to Ivangorod, which is a Russian town. It has a fortress, Ivangorodsky Krepust, I guess is what it is in Russian, Ivangorodskaya Krepust. And so you have Ivangorod fortress, and you have them kind of like a face-off. It's quite a dramatic setting, especially when I went there in the snow. That's part of the Russian Federation. So you have, if you were to see a icy dividing line, an icy curtain in this new Cold War that seems to be developing with the Russian Federation on one side replacing the Soviet Union as the new border, and then the other side you have Estonia, which is part of the European Union, and part of NATO, which is on the other side. So yeah, it's quite an iconic place to go to. I guess maybe like looking at the dividing line between East and West Berlin at a certain point, although people can travel back and forth, not so easy, and the road crossing was closed when I was there, but the footbridge was there, and you could schlep your suitcase across in the snow if you wanted to, but didn't have so much foot traffic when I was there. The town of Narva itself was pretty significantly colonized by people from the other parts of the Soviet Union after 1945. So today, most people in the city, vast majority, are native Russian speakers. They're not native Estonian speakers. So it has a different flavor. It's a small town. It's like maybe about 50,000 people. There wasn't much to do there, especially in January. It would have been so cold. I walked around. The standard of living there looks pretty good for a small town in such an isolated area with, now there isn't so much business crossing, with the Russian Federation, especially since 2022, with the border not being so open. But basically there were nice buildings there, and it definitely, when you looked across into the Russian Federation, the town on the other side, Ivangorod looks like an absolute dump. I think I could see like one building that was nicely painted by someone. When I looked across, and the rest of it just looked gray and miserable, and anyone who's been there, who's told me about it, said yes, it is pretty much an awful place. And you can see maybe the dichotomy between the two, how Estonia has developed and how the Russian Federation has not, outside of course, if you go to Moscow or St. Petersburg and a few other cities that are notable exceptions, where basically all the money from the Moscow Empire is funneled towards. When you go to the provinces like Ivangorod, it is pretty miserable, and you can see a huge difference in the standard of living. So that's kind of the scene where we have this town. The fact that it is overwhelmingly Russian speaking, with people who the majority are going to be, I guess, ethnically Russian, we can say, even if they're going to be nowadays, most of them Estonian citizens. Maybe not all of them, because prior to the independence of Estonia in 1991, if you were born in Narva and you didn't have any Estonian heritage, you basically migrated there during the Soviet days, and you don't speak any Estonian, then it might have been quite difficult for you to have gotten Estonian citizenship. So this is seen as a place where Russia can aim to destabilize a member of NATO, a member of the European Union, a country, and a territory that used to be part of the Moscow Empire. So it is a potential flashpoint, a bit like Ukraine was. And we're seeing a lot of the same Kremlin playbook. There are narratives being pushed on social media about an oppressed minority, that the people of Narva, like we've seen here in Ukraine, need to be saved, apparently saved from prosperity and freedom of expression, because those are things that are in short supply in a town across the border like Ivangorod. We've seen, actually, just as a slight digression, Russia cut off the internet in Moscow for a lot of last week. It's just very strange what's going on there, and they've been clumping down on Telegram. Ironically, Telegram is something that they use in Estonia to push their propaganda messages, which is interesting because they shut it off in, or throttled it completely in Russia itself, because they see as a way that the power vertical may be destabilized. So they don't allow Russians to have the ability to communicate freely on applications like Telegram, but then they use that against us here, where we have more freedom of expression. Not that it works perfectly in democratic countries either, but Russia being an increasingly authoritarian dictatorship, and one that's involved in the biggest war in Europe since World War II, which is a complete train wreck at this point, destroying their economy. Even if they got a boost with the rise in the oil price in the last few weeks, it's still in a recession, the Russian economy, and a lot of trouble. And obviously they have huge losses in terms of life in this war. But they are pumping out this narrative that there's a kind of a groundswell of a popular revolt in Narva against being part of Estonia, because they're oppressed, in inverted commas, and that is something that we saw in Donetsk and Luhansk when they attempted to take them over. And they got partial success then, and a little bit more success in terms of taking territory, but the Russian forces are still stuck in Donbass, which is Luhansk and Donetsk combined, and basically the current projection, well, it's actually the projection before the last few months, it will say late last year, is like it will take them 2 or 3 years more of fighting and hundreds of thousands of further casualties to actually completely control the Donbass region. I would say with the lack of progress that they've made recently, and we'll have to push that back even further, because at the current rate of progress, they're basically making none in that part of Ukraine since Starlink was turned off for the Russian forces. Why it was ever working for the Russian forces is a bit of a mystery to me, but now that it's been turned off, they are in a lot of trouble there. So that's what we've seen recently. And normally when or at least in the last week, when I bring up a potential attack on the Baltic states, people say, no, it's part of NATO and we've got Article 5. And that's true, there is the Article 5. But I encourage you to go and read Article 5, and you'll see it's not very clear about what countries actually have to do. Countries are not actually obligated by the text of Article 5 of NATO, which is the Mutual Defense Clause, to actually send ground troops to evict or eject foreign forces that may be occupying somewhere. So one scenario is that Russia could test how the reaction to a provocation, like we could see Little Green Men, if you think back to the occupation of the seizure and then occupation of Crimea. Russia used soldiers that were out, any insignia, they were known as Little Green Men, that had Russian accents that showed up, and Russia basically denied that they were even there. And then basically when it became a fait accompli that they were occupying the peninsula, they basically started giving out medals to the soldiers that had taken part in it. So we could see the scenario, because just across the river, and it's a relatively small town, that Russia seizes Narva with some special forces, no insignia, denies they're there, and then waits to see what NATO would do. So NATO is primarily US-backed defense organization that protects its members. In principle, it acts as a deterrent to primarily Russian aggression against its members. So since the end of the Cold War, it has expanded and enlarged to take in countries that used to be part of the Warsaw Pact, even the Soviet Union, like Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania, and other countries that were not in the Soviet Union, part of the Warsaw Pact, which was the opposing alliance, military alliance at that time of communist countries, or communist-controlled countries. Basically, they were puppet states of Moscow, and examples would be Hungary, Poland, well, it's now Czechia and Slovakia. At the time was Czechoslovakia, Yugoslavia at the time. Obviously, those countries have, those parts, component parts have become independent countries like Serbia, Croatia, Slovenia, etc. So those borders are now there, and this could be a way to test Article 5, especially under the current US administration. Donald Trump is the first president since the end of World War II. He's definitely the most favorable to the Kremlin that we've seen since that time period, and he has regularly questioned NATO, its value, Article 5, and basically spends a lot of the time making up stuff to denigrate NATO, so like that NATO allies wouldn't come to the US's support, when the only time that Article 5 has actually been invoked was after 9/11, and many of the allies of the United States in NATO did come to the US's assistance. Unfortunately, that was going to Iraq and Afghanistan, which didn't work out very well in the end, but they were there and many soldiers died. So the fact that he says these things indicates that there's a possibility, a strong possibility in my opinion, that if Russia were to seize, Russian forces were to seize Narva, declare it a Narva People's Republic, that US is not going to send any ground troops. Now there are some other NATO forces there. It's not just Estonian troops in Estonia. There's a British led contingent of NATO forces that are located about 2 hours away from Narva. Is that close enough? Well, probably not to stop a seizure of the city if it was done by some special forces very quickly, with possibly some local collaborators. And then the question would be to evict those forces. If you look at it from Russia's point of view and Vladimir Putin, why would he want to do that? Why would he want to escalate by doing a higher provocation than he has so far with the, say, the drone incursions or airplanes invading NATO airspace? Well, at the moment, he's bogged down in this war in Ukraine. He has achieved very little of value strategically. You could say he got the land bridge to Crimea by seizing the territory along the Sea of Azov. But he already had a physical bridge to Crimea that was built illegally on occupied territory since 2014. So strategically, it's very minor. And basically, they lost Kherson, which is the only regional city that they captured. They did capture Mariupol, which they sacked and basically destroyed most of the city. And that is a lot of the newly occupied territories that Russia have taken. They basically destroyed them and looted them. So there isn't that much value. His stated objectives were to, he used the term denazification, which is basically taking over the Ukrainian government, installing at a minimum a puppet government in Kyiv, if not actually annexing large parts of Ukraine. Since then, they claim to have annexed, obviously this is all illegal under international law, Kherson, Zaporizhia, Donetsk, Luhansk, and they already claim to have annexed illegally, which is not recognized under international law, Crimea. But presumably they had succeeded in taking the capital Kyiv. If you think back to 2022 and that long traffic jam they had on the road coming down from Belarus to Kyiv, that was the expectation. They claimed that they would demilitarize as a strategic objective. They'll go back to Vladimir Putin's speech they gave 2 days before the February 24, 2022 invasion. That meant that demilitarization is destroying the Ukrainian army. The Ukrainian army today is so much bigger than the Ukrainian army was there. It is so much more sophisticated. You want to look for an example of that. Just look what's happening in the Middle East. Where are these Arab allies of the United States going to get drone interceptors, air defense? They're talking to Zelensky because Ukraine is the guy on their side of the ledger that has that technology. And Donald Trump can say that they don't need that, they have the best drones in the world or whatever he wants to say. The reality is that they are battle tested, the best drones in the world here in Ukraine. It's not something I would have wished for Ukraine to become famous for, but it is what it is with this Russian aggression. So basically the two best or biggest armies that you have in Europe at the moment are the Russian Federations and the Ukrainian army. So that is something that these Gulf states suddenly find themselves very interested in, and obviously there will be some sort of quid pro quo there. Same with probably Israel and maybe the United States, even if Donald Trump said something different in public. I also read something about his sons investing in a drone company that has some connections with Ukraine as well. So that's what you're going to see, going forward in terms of cooperation between Ukraine. It's also something I've talked about a lot on this channel with respect to the number of foreign investors in Ukraine, particularly with this war, is the defense industry, agriculture, and real estate. That's what I see the most interest in from people who contact me, clients, etc., here in Ukraine at the moment. So the NATO troops to react are about 2 hours away. So he's backed down, Vladimir Putin, in Ukraine. He doesn't have any strategic victories. It has cost Russia over 1 million in terms of casualties. That's killed in action, wounded in action, missing in action. And it has cost the Russian economy. It's gone from being maybe not a thriving economy, but one that was reasonably stable to one that is now in recession. And basically they've been burning through their reserves, at least until this windfall from Operation Epic Fury, and obviously the Strait of Hormuz has been closed, but we don't know for how long that's going to go on. Maybe, I don't think Donald Trump can risk high oil prices, gasoline prices at the pump in America by the midterms, and probably long before the midterms, he needs to see a resolution of that the prices also go down. That would mean ending the situation in the Middle East, and the prices that Russia gets for its resources also coming back down to what were pretty low price points before Operation Epic Fury was begun in the Middle East a few weeks ago. So he needs to get some sort of strategic victory. He cannot allow, in my opinion, also this is shared by Igor Girkin, the guy I mentioned, is a former high-ranking member of the GRU, which is Russia's intelligence, who was involved in the operations in Ukraine. He's a Russian ultranationalist. We are on obviously completely opposite sides ideologically. He sits in a Russian jail, not because he's some liberal pro-democracy opponent of Vladimir Putin. It's because he thinks Vladimir Putin is basically a strategic failure, and that they need a different approach to actually win the war. That's why Vladimir Putin puts him in prison. He's still alive for now. We'll see for how long that lasts. If you look what happened with Navalny, when there was a decision made to, I think we can at this point say they've even released what it was that killed him. It was like some poison from some sort of frog that was used, some venom, to kill him in Russian prison. So we'll see what happens with Igor Girkin in the long term. But Vladimir Putin, if things keep going, he needs some sort of strategic out in terms of being able to show an achievement. And one thing that could provide that to him is, if he can't get it here in Ukraine, he could go and demonstrate that NATO, which he sees as, well, in reality, I mean, the propagandists say that it's threatening Russia. In reality, what it is, it's preventing Russian imperial expansion back into former parts of its empire, like in the 3 Baltic states. Think back, if before this invasion or before 2014, do you think that Russia would have attacked Ukraine if Narva, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania were not in NATO? Well, they would have been a lot easier target, except for the fact that Article 5 gives the impression, at least prior to Donald Trump, that the US will actually come with ground troops and protect those countries. So it makes it very high cost. That's the perception of Moscow, to go and try and take those. Ukraine was not in NATO, wasn't likely to join. That's why Russia felt that this would be the weaker target, and they have failed in their attempts to take over this country. So that could be one thing that Vladimir Putin could get a strategic victory out of. Say he takes Narva and no one does anything, the Estonians not going to kick him out, he'll be able to demonstrate, listen, I'm able to show that we have defeated the idea of NATO as a defensive collective organization that acts as a deterrence to Russian imperial expansion and aggression. So that could be something that he could achieve. Do I personally think that if the Russians use forces to seize Narva, that it will be successful? I think it's a low probability, which is why I think this is just creating the groundwork, either as just to create the option for Vladimir Putin. I don't think there's an imminent plan to seize Narva. I think what will likely to happen, even if Donald Trump doesn't do anything to help the Estonians, I think there's enough countries in the alliance that are going to come to Estonia's aid. I think in particular Finland and Sweden, which are also in the Baltic area and joined NATO since the invasion of 2022. I think they will send ground forces, in particular the Finns. I think the allies that are neighbors of Estonia, like Latvia and Lithuania, will have basically needs to come to their aid as well. Probably Poland. It's hard to know with this current president, Narva, what he would do, but I think with the prime minister, I have to see. I'd be surprised if Narva would try and stop the deployment of ground troops from Poland to defend Narva. He is, even if he is aligned with MAGA, he's also pretty openly and, as one would expect from Polish president, pretty anti-Moscow. So that would be likely to happen. Not as sure. I think Ukraine will send troops. I think they will send their drone technology, and they will assist the Estonians. That is something that's come out of this war. And to use that metaphor that Donald Trump used, and to flip it back at him about Zelensky and Ukraine not having any cards. Ukraine has a lot of cards when it comes to defending other countries against Russian aggression and Russian proxy aggression, like in the shape of Iran, where they are assisting, it seems pretty openly at this stage, with intelligence and probably also drones themselves, which are targeting American troops in the Middle East. So that's why Ukraine is so important, because they have the experience of fighting against those kind of threats. So I would also expect the Ukrainians to come to Estonia, and I think the UK maybe will send small detachments of forces, maybe also France in that scenario. And I think that would be enough to eject those Russian forces. Probably in that case, Russia will just deny that they were ever there. Oh, these are local people who just got all this equipment and drones, and presumably they would also use drones and weapons that are all Russian, and they just happen to show up, just not wearing any insignia, and then they would basically cross the river and go back. It's not that they could probably swim across it, get back to their own side, and just deny they were ever there. So it's something that Putin could try, and would it have much of a cost? And he's going to just deny that they were ever there, that they were just local people who tried an insurgency, and basically probably it would not have a huge cost for him, which is why it may be attractive. Now, I think it's the reason to start this information campaign about a Narva People's Republic, inverted commas, is to give Vladimir Putin the option, maybe in a couple of months, of trying that, or it's actually a distraction, and they are going to try a similar operation, but in a different part of the region. And I would think if they're going to do it somewhere else in the region, it would be in Latvia, probably somewhere around, maybe not quite Daugavpils, where I shot some live streams last year, but there's another town, I think it's called Lomza, that's nearer to the border and looks, it's smaller, presumably less defended, and that could be another place they could do it. They could also do in Finland, because they have a huge border now with Finland, which is NATO border now, but maybe they would pick somewhere uninhabited or a very small village somewhere. Could also do it out of Belarus and try and grab a hamlet somewhere in Lithuania. There's a few weird borders where they go around and meander in that region. That might make a soft target to take over. There's like a road that has to go, I think, to Russia somewhere. I think it might also be in Estonia somewhere, something similar. So there they could try, but this would be really grabbing a place that might have 50, 100 people living in it, and then just deny that they're there and see what happens. So this is a possibility. I think it makes strategic sense for Putin because of the disaster he has in Ukraine to try and get some sort of strategic victory. I don't think it'll be successful. I don't know what advice Vladimir Putin gets. It doesn't seem to be very good. I think he's surrounded by sycophants, and that means that he may make a miscalculation. But in general, I think this is a low probability event for now. I would not be concerned about going to the region at least until the end of the summer. I don't think there's reason to think that it would happen, and I don't think it would involve, at least in the initial phases, any attack that would affect where you're probably going to go. If you're going to go to Tallinn, if you're going to go to Riga, if you're going to go to Vilnius, I think you would have enough time to evacuate in any case. So I don't see it as a highly likely event for now, for the next couple of months, but it's something to be cognizant of and to realize what's going on if you are going to go to the region. And as I was saying at the outset with this presentation, that geopolitical risk is something that if you're traveling more or less anywhere at this point, with a few exceptions, and definitely if you're relocating, something that you're going to have to take into account a lot more, because the rules-based international order, which didn't work amazingly well, but it was better than having this situation where imperialism makes a return and you can see these wars break out with a lot more frequency across the globe. Something that we've grown up with, at least I grew up with, was more or less a peace dividend. I remember obviously the Cold War going on when I was a child, but since I became an adult, I basically lived through this peace dividend, as it's known, where, especially in Europe, countries didn't invest much in their defense because Russia was seen as, Moscow was seen as, obviously before the Soviet Union and the Russian Emperor before that, it was not seen as big a threat. That is returned, and these are the times that we live in. There could be cyber attacks, there could be some drone incursions, maybe some border issues. Maybe we've seen in the past the utilization of immigrants, illegal immigration, to try and cause disturbances at the border and to create wedges within the society. We've seen that with Belarus, with Lukashenko, with Poland and Lithuania, for example. So we could see a continuation of those kind of operations, plus more information being used, being weaponized on platforms like Telegram to create the impression and kind of create prepare the information space for a possible operation by Russia in the future. So another thing to look out for, I said in one of my previous live streams, if suddenly Russia poses the war in Ukraine, then that's the time to be quite concerned about a possible operation in the Baltics, because Vladimir Putin will be taking a huge risk if he suddenly lets hundreds of thousands of Russian soldiers come home. They've been making, by Russian standards, especially if they are poorly skilled in the countryside, they're making huge money by being in the military. And obviously they're going to have a lot of people with post-traumatic stress disorder. They have a lot of people who are sadists to sign up, people who are going to be used to killing people, being violent, and used to make a lot of money, and then you're going to tell them to make 5% of the previous salary when they come back to Russia. Not a good situation if you are an aging authoritarian, you want to cling on to power. Probably don't want those people coming back. Mainly, most of them come from the countryside, so they're not going to come back en masse to Moscow, but it may create a lot of political problems, and he would have an interest in seeing those soldiers go somewhere else, like doing an operation somewhere in another region like the Baltics, to try and achieve a strategic victory, because he would have failed here in Ukraine in that scenario, presumably, unless the Ukrainians decide to capitulate, which I see very little interest in for now amongst the public or the government, or basically anyone who's in Ukraine. Basically the vast majority of Ukrainians. So I'll sum up my presentation before I get to the Q&A with what does this mean if you are thinking of relocating to Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, or the broader region, maybe Sweden or Finland, Denmark, other countries that are in the Baltic region, Germany as well, Poland. I've alluded to it. I don't think there's an immediate concern for right now. So I'm not being alarmist by doing this presentation. I just think it's interesting to be aware of the possibility of this happening. I mean, everyone in the Middle East was warned by the fact that the Houthis have fired drones already at an airport in the United Arab Emirates, but no one took any heed until they end up in this situation where now they're living under a certain amount of drone attack, nothing like we have here in Ukraine in general, but probably means that, and I've seen it when I was in Latvia and Estonia, there's been a lot of foreign investment that has been pulled out of those two countries, a lot less so in Lithuania. That's why you see the Lithuanian economy is probably the strongest in the region. And that's actually a big change from the previous 2 decades, where Estonia always had the strongest growing economy per capita, obviously, so it's more than Poland. And that means that there's going to be probably more opportunities if you are more of a risk taker and you think, okay, the risk is small that my apartment in Riga will get damaged by Russia, that'll get occupied, or something bad will happen to it, or in Tallinn. So we're only talking about Narva for now, or maybe a small town on the border in Latvia or Lithuania with the Russian Federation or with Belarus. So the price of property, I did that video with Karina, it must be over a year ago, maybe 15 months ago, about buying property in Latvia. I'll link it down below if I haven't done it already. It's there on the channel. Go back when you're watching this replay. I should have already put it there if it's not there already. And to give you an idea, if you're a non-EU citizen, so you're British, you're Canadian, you're American, and you're looking for residency in the European Union, in the Schengen area, then that is one possibility. It's €250,000 investment into real estate, and basically, in the end, you'll end up spending about close to 300,000, so we'll say a little bit over 300,000 US dollars. And the rent yields are very attractive in Latvia, so if you weren't actually planning to spend all your time there, you're planning to rent it out, it could be a good investment opportunity, and it will give you residency there as well. So it'll improve your mobility if you are, for example, American, Canadian, etc. The reason this path to citizenship is quite long. You have to be resident for 10 years. So after 5 years, you renew it, and then you apply for citizenship. So it would be about 11 years in total before you would become a Latvian citizen. You also have to pass a Latvian language test, but Probably there's a civics test as well, or there will be by the time you get to actually sit the test, as we're talking about in a decade's time. You have plenty of time to learn Latvian. I wouldn't really worry about that too much if you're really committed to becoming an EU citizen. EU citizen allows you to live and to work and establish business anywhere in the European Union. And basically, think of it, if you're American, it's like pretty much the same as being an American citizen, and you decide, you're born in California and you want to go to New York. There's only a few minor restrictions, basically country to country, that are based on your nationality if you're not actually from that part of the European Union. So it's a great perk to have. And also there may be some other travel advantages you would get in an EU passport. So that's something to look at if you are considering, because this is keeping the prices of property in Latvia lower than they would be otherwise. Interesting, because we're talking about the Middle East. I feature in that the waterfront development in Riga, which has actually been led by some developers from the Emirates. So they're going to make it Dubai on the Baltic, basically, in a few years. As long as it's successful, that will be the most prestigious and luxurious part of Riga. At the moment, that is basically, you have two options, other options. It's a historic center, well, not just the very historic center, but also broadly with the new center. And if you decide to buy a villa out in the countryside, it's very nice, particularly in the summer. In the winter, well, then you can have a sauna, that sauna experience with the snow and all that kind of good stuff. So it's not for everybody going to Latvia as a place to relocate to. I think the winters are a little bit harsh, same with Estonia, same with Poland as well, same back in the day in Belarus. It tends to be quite grey in the winter. Summers are amazing because obviously then you get about 4 or 5 months of great sunshine, and it's very lush and the nature is beautiful. So I would think after my experience there last winter that it could be a place that you could have as one base, but you probably want to head to somewhere, be a migratory bird in that sense during the winter, and probably take a month in Brazil or Colombia or somewhere else, somewhere where it's sunny at least during the winter. I think that would be a good balance to have. It's actually what I used to do in the past. I used to head always to Brazil for 1 month, maybe something I'm going to start doing next year again. So I would say that's the takeaway, to understand that there are significant pressures being built up by Russia towards the Baltic region in general, but there's no need to panic for now. I think that some sort of military action is imminent, but be aware of that, especially if you're going to spend time in the region. You have to also understand the geopolitics, especially if you're going to make investments and maybe set part of your life there. So I'll go and look at the comments and the questions right now, and then I can go back and we can have more of a discussion about what's been happening in the region. Also give you some more insights into life in Tallinn, for example, or Riga, or the other parts of the region that I spent a lot of time in last winter. Joshua says, Buongiorno, Conor. It seems like NATO is more focused on Hormuz than Ukraine. Yes, this is the latest special military operation launched by Benjamin Netanyahu and Donald Trump. I think that's a good thing for Ukraine. I know Zelensky said the opposite. I don't know if he really believes that or he just thinks it's a shrewd move to stay in public. I think the less that the White House thinks about this war in Ukraine, the better for Ukraine. So it's probably not good that the European allies of Ukraine spend less time focusing in Ukraine, now have to focus on the Strait of Hormuz. Doesn't seem like they're going to do a huge amount to help the US for now and Israel for now, but we'll see how that all develops in the next few weeks. But I think that's actually a good thing. That's my opinion. Donald Trump's administration leans pro-Russian in its actions, what it demands of Ukraine, which is basically a medium to long-term capitulation. So, and keeps talking about doing deals, and they sent out a bunch of, let's be frank, greedy real estate developers to do the negotiations. So I would say overall probably good for Ukraine. But again, Zelensky doesn't seem to agree with me on that, at least in public. Joshua also says the war could end if oil supplies are stretched too thin. Maybe a good thing. I'm not sure which war you mean. You mean the war in the Middle East or the war here? Please clarify. A later grader says that he was in Narva. Everything outside Tallinn, including Narva, looked pretty bad, comparable to rural Russia or Ukraine. General level development in the Baltic seems bad. I don't agree at all. There's a huge difference between the level of development in Narva compared to a city 50,000 people that's pretty remote in Ukraine for sure, and you can just look across the river and see what a dump it was on the other side. So I noticed a significant difference in living standards. I was saying Narva is an amazing place. Someone wrote to me when I was there, or when I was hanging out still last year, that he was learning Russian in Narva. I don't know, it looked boring to me. There's only a few pubs there and some restaurants, so it was fine for a few days. It was an interesting experience. It was great in terms of seeing what could become an iconic spot in terms of this new Cold War that we have in Europe, to actually go and experience it, because of my background in international relations. If you're new to the channel, I worked as a lawyer at the EU institutions, also in private practice in Germany and in Brussels, in Munich in Germany and Brussels. And I have a background, an academic background in international relations. I studied at Johns Hopkins University at their School of Advanced International Studies with a specialization in this region. I speak Russian and increasingly Ukrainian as well, and some of the other languages in the region. And I've been in this region for most of the last decade. So that's why I feel I can give you a more nuanced take on the geopolitics and not the kind of dribble that you see most of these lifestyle gurus tell you about because they read on some, some blog or some YouTuber that just repeat what they heard in their information bubble. I can give you real analysis here. So in terms of economic development, the GDP per capita PPS, so that's taking across the local prices in Poland and the Lithuania, Latvian, and Estonia, put them all together. It is double what it is in Russia. That's before Putin even started this train wreck kind of invasion. So since then, the difference has gotten even starker because Russian economy is in a lot of trouble and they're wasting all this money blowing up stuff in Ukraine and building tanks that last a few weeks in Ukraine, and all these people have been killed. So it's even bigger than that now, and it's going to become stark, especially when the oil price goes back down again. Assuming that's going to be the case, we're not going to see a huge boom in the oil prices for a couple of years. That would help Russia and the Russian economy quite a lot. And the actual Oblast of Moscow is poorer than Poland, Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia. So if you think it's like rural Russia, Ukraine, and what you were looking at when you were in Narva, but it ain't what I was seeing outside my window or when I was walking around, because you don't see that level of development in if you go to a provincial Ukrainian or Belarusian town like Belarus. Even towns that have like a few 100,000 people don't have the same development as Narva. So yeah, bizarre comment. I think actually the seaside was quite nice. There's a town near to Narva, just before we stayed there. It's quite a nice resort town. Well, I was there in the winter, and yeah, in terms of development, you have better roads than you're going to see in most provincial Russia. Like Russia's so big, provincial Russia, they didn't invest in the infrastructure. Most of it is really limited. People don't realize that, because if you went to Russia back in the day, obviously, particularly in my case, yeah, I was there last in 2019. Yeah, it's very different in St. Petersburg or Moscow. When you go to these provincial towns, I've been to Kaliningrad, and even that was pretty grim when I went there. So, Best in Class says the border at Narva Yanlin was reopened some time ago, but long lines to get into Russia. Checks are long. Yes, it is a dump. Estonia being in NATO, Narva will not be republic, and the Russians there are mostly pensioners and enjoy perks of being well paid and being in the EU, plus they can travel across the bridges. Exactly. There's not going to be much of a groundswell to be poor and have a war. But some people fall victim to propaganda, I guess, but it would be rather retarded to do that. Joshua says, will there be a post-war shock, PTSD, drugs, vodka, and instant recovery? Are you talking about in the Russian Federation or in Ukraine? I mean, it's going to face some of the different problems depending how the war ends. I see also a lot of guys who can come back to front and they're going to be psychologically traumatized. I think they're more likely to get assistance here than in the Russian Federation. I think it's going to be grim in those provincial regions of Russia. You're just going to have a lot of screwed up people who've seen horrific things, taken part in horrific things, and they're going to come back. And in Russia's case, they're going to go from very little, from making a windfall financially by being a volunteer in the military, to being pauperized again. And that's going to mean there's going to be a lot of criminality. A lot of people, men who come back, are just going to become criminals, and they're going to have experience of killing people and using firearms. So it's going to be pretty dangerous in a lot of those areas. That's why Putin, if he's sensible, he's not going to let them come back, most of them, because there's a possibility they'll try to overthrow him to some degree. Next comment, if you have a Slavic grandma, grandpa, you can get in. Okay, Estonian pension, says Thomas, is 680 to 912 euros per month, but Russian is only 240 to 480 euros per month. Yeah. There you go. So basically, it's more than half. It's less than half of the pension. That just tells you all you need to know. Of course, maybe the prices are, depending, are a bit cheaper. You also have to take that into account. Ivangorod population 9,400. Okay, Narva 53,400. Narva average salary brutto, so that's gross salary, is 1,500 euros. Net is 1,270 euros. But in Ivangorod, it's only 490 to 800 euros. So yeah, there you see the difference in the living standards. It's quite stark between the two. Like, it looked huge when you look at Russia. Okay, Ivangorod is, you know, a lot smaller. It's like, if it was one country, I guess it'd be like a suburb, because you just have the bridge across the river. But it looks like a dump of like, yeah, it's like the worst part. It'd be like the worst part of Estonia if it was in it, basically. I've been to the hood in Tallinn. I've forgotten the name of it now. What is it called? Is it Lisname? Is that the name of it? I went there, went to the gym, went around. There are some restaurants. Yeah, it looks better than Ivangorod. But then again, it's in Tallinn, so it's near the capital. But it's known as the bad part of Tallinn. But yeah, I mean, it's fine. It's not great, but it's fine. General gives, so what are the chances of the problem Russian population in Narva being deported? I would say that's very low if they have citizenship. Or if they, yeah. Latvia has actually changed their policy now. If you're a resident and you're a Russian citizen, and you have not applied for citizenship, it may become problematic for you. They are introducing language tests, so if you've never learned the language, then you may be at risk of being deported. So, but I didn't see that happening in Estonia. Best in classes, actually, Ivangorod is Yanelin and Estonian territory by the Treaty of Tartu. Signed pre-Soviet time and as revisited recently, according to Pskov, in the southwest border area as well. Yes, the Soviet, the borders, for better or worse, we accepted, or those countries accepted the borders that were the internal borders in the Soviet Union with the Soviet Socialist Republics as the international borders when the Soviet Union dissolved. So it is what it is. I would prefer that they just stick to those rather than Russia trying to redraw them by invading Ukraine, for example. So, keep your comments and questions coming. Let me maybe, at this juncture, remind you of what it's like in Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania, because I was there last winter. So, the weather in the winter, not the best. It's obviously not tropical. There isn't much sunshine, and it can be quite cold. I think that's pretty obvious. At the same time, very good infrastructure development. I think Riga is my favorite in the region. It's the biggest city, most going on. Tallinn would be my second favorite. And even though the economy of Lithuania is booming, actually, at the moment, it's really the Baltic tiger, so to say. I find it a little less exciting in Vilnius and Kaunas. I think the nightlife is quite limited there. And they don't have things zoned, well, at least in Vilnius. They have things zoned, that's the problem. And then the tourists can all find the places. There isn't really an exclusivity. There's no real place where they have proper face control compared to Riga, where it's very heavy face control and they basically have no tourist policy. So that's good. Like, you want these barriers to entry to create arbitrage, basically. So I think I discussed it last week that if you have arbitrage opportunities, they're created by some sort of barrier to entry normally. So geographic can be far away, so not so many people come. Or it's kind of like face controlled out, so but it's obviously to your advantage when you get through that barrier to entry and you're on the other side. So for me, in terms of if you're a single guy, which is what most of you are, basically, you watch this channel, then for me, as I said, in the entire region, I think Riga is the best spot if you're a high-level guy, because you can leverage the fact that most of the foreign guys who go to Riga, and there's increasingly more foreign girls who go there, especially for the weekend, because the historic center is really beautiful. But that's what they do. They hang on the historic centers, which are basically tourist traps, and they never find the good places. It's very rare you see them in Riga, even at a good place. And of course, the very good places like the clubs or whatever, they basically have no tourist policy. They try to keep the tourists out of the best place. That's where the high-level locals go to socialize. And yeah, just most model level beauty in the world per capita. Estonia has the most models, catwalk models per capita in the world as a country. Latvia is number 5, and I think Lithuania is number 3 on that listing I saw. So yeah, just a model beauty. People are taller than average for Europe in the Baltic, so you've got just a lot of leggy blondes and leggy brunettes everywhere. So yeah, I would think that with the right plan, it's the best place to be a single guy. It is not going to be pennies on the pound, cents on the dollar in terms of the price differential. It is better value than being, say, in Sweden or Finland. The price level is lower for commensurate services or products, but it's going to be like 20 or 30% cheaper. It's not going to be, 80% cheaper, something wild. It's not a passport blow destination. In fact, I've seen these dating coaches online or pickup artists comment on it, and they all say don't go basically to Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania because they found it difficult there. Women, they describe them as suspicious. Again, these are things that if you want to go and relocate there or spend, you don't have to spend a year there, but say you want to spend a few months in Latvia and you're a single guy, that is great news, because that means that the weekend warriors have no success and they stay away, which means if you spend some time there, build up a local social circle, you have the local knowledge about what are the best places, because these guys are watching, they had no idea where to go, obviously, and you have an actual reason to be there. Hey, yeah, I'm doing this and that in the city, I'm here for a few months, and you have time to meet up with women you meet again, then it's going to be fantastic. If every Tom, Dick, and Harry can waltz into Riga and leave with, a 9 or 10, right, a supermodel, then believe me, yeah, there won't be too many supermodels left, and you wouldn't have that arbitrage advantage by setting for your lifestyle to be successful there. So that is the advantage that obviously I help my clients with. You can call it an unfair advantage to a certain extent, right? That these guys go as the weekend warriors and then they get basically nowhere and they say the place is terrible. They all kind of scurry back to Warsaw, which if you're seeing a guy, it's, yeah, okay, it's better than being in London or New York for sure, but it's not that amazing. And yeah, I don't know, I guess there are more immigrants there that, from Ukraine and Belarus, although there are also a lot of them in Vilnius and in Tallinn, so I don't really think that's actually a massive difference. I think it's just a bigger city where it's a little bit more anonymous and they're used to people coming and going. So maybe my understanding is that the girls were not as suspicious in Warsaw, but I guess that must be the Ukrainians and Belarusians mainly, because Polish girls in general, very few of the attractive ones go out with foreigners. From what I can see in Warsaw, I'm not saying there are none, but it's like very rare. You see the less attractive Polish girls with foreigners for sure. So we'll say the girls are a little bit more rotund, because you have a little bit of that in Poland, a little bit more than you're going to see in the in Estonia, Latvia, or Lithuania. Actually, they're maybe a little bit bigger in average than girls in Ukraine or Belarus, I would say, or Moldova, a little bit. But in Poland, we're saying a little bigger again. They're not as big as British women on average, or American women for sure, where there's a bit of an obesity issue. Especially amongst young women. It's pretty shocking when I go to the UK or Ireland outside of, that more fancy areas where people tend to be slimmer, women tend to be slimmer. There's definitely an issue. And yeah, the last time I went to the States, obviously it's a bit of a shock in terms of the bad eating habits that people have. It's not just women, but obviously we're talking about dating as a heterosexual guy, we're talking about women, but even men as well. Obviously they have an issue with obesity. So that's what you don't see there. In terms of infrastructure, it's part of the European Union, it's a developed country, not quite as developed as say being in Germany or being in France, but because everything was built newer in the last few years, it's catching up. And you don't think that one thing that it misses is like Warsaw is a big city, like it's between 2 and 3 million people. So if you want a city that big with obviously a lot more stuff going on, then it's easier to find out in Warsaw. There are a lot more foreigners in Warsaw as well, a lot more immigration there. Also from all over the world, because it's a hub for the region. It's what I call New Europe's capital, and you're not going to find that in Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia. And all three are a bit different. We kind of lumped them together as the Baltic states, but Estonia, the culture is a lot more similar to Finland than it is to even Latvia or Russia. So and the majority are ethnic is Estonians in Estonia. There is a Russian-speaking minority in Tallinn. It's reasonably big in Tallinn. But if you go out and socialize in the nice places, most people speak Estonian. Whilst in Riga, even though the city is kind of 50-50 in terms of Latvian and Russian speakers, if you go to the nicer places, it tends to be a bit more Russian speaking, I would say. So that's a big difference. There seems to have been a kind of like upper middle class that was Russian speaking in Riga that you don't find in Tallinn. I think the immigration or migration or colonization, depends what term you want to use, in Riga was earlier than in Tallinn, where I think a lot of them came at the very end of the Soviet Union to Tallinn, and then they were kind of at this Lasnamäe, which was being built at the time, which is now the kind of bad area. Not that it's really a hood, but it's definitely not as prosperous as other parts of the city. So that's a difference. In Lithuania, they didn't really have that much Russification. So yeah, you have a lot of Belarusians and Ukrainians who are there at the moment. But in general, in Vilnius, I think it's like 10% Russian speaking, maybe now with some Russian speaking Belarusians, and Ukraine's a bit more. But in Kaunas, for example, I went to the best place in Kaunas where they have strict face control. And my impression from the reviews were that they don't let many foreigners in. There was a lot of complaints for foreigners that they would get refused there. I just went up and I spoke in my limited Lithuanian and actually even brought a client there the second time I went. We went to this place in Kaunas, and we were the only two non-Lithuanian speakers there. There weren't even any Russian speakers in Kaunas at the place we went in. So we heard very little Russian, and Kaunas is really Lithuanian speaking ethnic. Lithuania used to have a bit of a bad reputation because it was more a working class city, a little bit rougher as a place, but I don't think it's particularly rough nowadays, having been there last year. So that was kind of my overall synopsis on those countries. So price point, a little bit obviously more affordable than being in, better value for money than being in other parts of the Nordics like Finland or Sweden. I think in terms of the quality of the service and everything, it's a little bit behind, but not that much. And yeah, in terms of the local people are a bit standoffish in the Baltic states in general. I think Lithuanians were probably the most open. I like to say it looks like Poland because they were one country at one time. So were parts of Latvian, and Estonia. I think maybe a tiny bit of Estonia. You can see that kind of predominantly Catholic if they have a religion in Lithuania as well. Whilst it's different in Latvia, it's like more mixed, and Estonia is very atheist in general. So they have a lot of the same architecture as Poland, but the people are, I think, taller, better looking, more elegant, and friendlier than people are in Poland. So in general, as a generalization, not that every Pole is like this, but let's be frank about it. Poles are not very friendly in general. Definitely, or polite in general, I would say, when you meet them. Kind of a little bit gruff in general, and especially worse because they just have so many foreigners. Polish people are not so open, I would say, overall. Did make also Polish friends when I was there hanging out, especially in 2023 and 2024. So I don't want to be too harsh on the Poles, but Lithuania was definitely, if you go there as a foreigner, you'll get away with speaking English a lot more. Not because Poles don't speak English, I just think because it's a bigger language and they're used to more immigrants learning Polish than people are in the Baltic, in Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia. They're just not used to foreigners learning their language because they're small and they don't have so much immigration as there is in Poland. So, and they have Russian-speaking minorities in some parts, and some people just use that as a lingua franca. So you can get away a lot more with speaking English there socially than you can in Poland, where if you don't speak Polish, it's a lot tougher than I think it is not speaking Latvian, Lithuanian, or Estonian. Although after 4 months in Estonia, I started coming under a little bit of pressure to learn Estonian. And yeah, I didn't know, am I going to go back to Estonia or not, right? So I wasn't going to invest in it. It's a hard language to learn. These languages, if you compare it to learning Spanish, or French or German, most people watch this channel have tried to learn one of those languages. Learning Ukrainian, learning Russian, learning Estonian, learning Lithuanian, learning Latvian, learning Polish. It will take 2 to 3 times longer to learn that than to learn Spanish. So it's a big investment of time. And like if you go and learn Estonian, you never come back to Estonia, it's kind of, obviously, it's not really very valuable to you. So whilst Polish, it's a bigger language, similar to other languages, like it's similar to Ukrainian, similar to Belarusian, similar to Czech. It's even, it's a little bit more distant to Russian than those languages. So if you move somewhere else in the region, it will be helpful for learning that other language. But if you learn Estonian, it's only helpful if you want to learn Finnish. And apparently, it is helpful if you want to learn Finnish. So, but outside that, you're probably not going to get any value out of it. So that's why I didn't go and learn it. And here we are a year later, and I'm spending a lot of time back in Ukraine and Moldova and Kazakhstan. So yeah, I don't know when I go back to Estonia next. I'm hopeful to make it there before the end of the summer. Also go back to Poland. I'm speaking to a YouTuber based in Poland. We're probably going to just do a video now remotely, podcast episode in the next few weeks, because I don't know when I'm coming back to Warsaw. We've been talking about it for, I filmed actually a clip for a vlog I'm making in Warsaw, but I'll finish that for sure when I get back. I have the new idea in my head how to complete it. So hopefully I'm going to go back there before the end of the summer, but it's unclear for now, and I'll give you an update of what it's like in the summer. If you're a single guy, I think the beauty level, if you like that model, obviously European in general, quality of beauty, then you're going to find that the most, especially blondes, because the blondest part of the world is the Baltic region, the Nordic region. So in particular Estonia, actually Finland, I think Sweden have a higher percentage of natural blondes, but after that it's Estonia, I think then Latvia, and then Lithuania. It's a lot less blonde. So if you like leggy blondes, I was saying, or just leggy anything, because girls are taller, I like tall girls in general. And I like models. I've been accused of model maxing, which I stand guilty as charged. I'm willing to make that confession. In general, dating models, and as I said in the last few live streams, I've realized that a disproportionate number of my clients end up marrying models or starting families with models. So it's kind of crazy. It's not that all of them do, but definitely a very large percentage of them. So this is the region and the channel, if that's what you're interested in general. If you're a single guy, for sure, I think this is the best place. Are they going to want to hook up with any, Tom, Dick, and Harry shows up waving an American passport or a British passport or a French passport? I think this is 2026, not 1996. So I don't think that works. But if you know the place to go to, you have a reason to be there, providing value. It's like the same mantra I say, if you're providing value locally, you're there not as a weekend warrior, and you have good social skills, you set up even better local social, even better again if you can speak the local language, although that's a long-term investment obviously to make, then you're going to do extremely well. I had a guy invested in my guide for going to Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia. In the end, I'm putting them all together because I just think it makes more sense. So you want to write me an email if you want that guide. It's Conor@ConorClyne.com. If you want the guides for Moldova and Ukraine, you can purchase them via the link below as well. But anyways, he went out. He enjoyed the places I recommended there. He actually sent me some messages from them. He was a Brazilian guy who's traveling, and he said, yeah, it's fantastic. So, and he's single. So, if you are a male model, famous, or you're a billionaire and just basically can buy everything just by showing up somewhere, then you can kind of go anywhere and just have fun. You don't really need to worry about having a social circles, knowing the right place is an advantage, but probably having much social skills. But if you're not in a very, 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 very small cohort of men, then you need to work in these other things. That's also what I help my clients with my in-person mentoring and my remote mentoring. So if you'd like to dive deeper into that, you can apply for my in-person immersion known as New Europe Experience, and we will go to a city together that we agree on. You have to apply because by application only. I only deem about 10% of guys who apply as being the right kind of person who's going to be a good fit. So there's no harm in applying. Obviously, you have the application form. There's a link to it down below. And basically, you're going to have me with you with my encyclopedic knowledge, my connections in the city. It's going to get you set up. It's like many of my clients go to a few cities because they just want the experience of going there with me. They don't want to be billion nomads or go with some lame dude who's going to probably be a net negative liability on the trip. That was one of the big issues I had when I first started coming to the region. I basically designed this in-person immersion to be something that I would have paid for myself when I was a lawyer living in Brussels and Munich and traveling here quite regularly, because I didn't have the local connection. I only realized this later, that once I made them, man, it transformed the whole experience. I didn't know the places to go to. And yeah, it was adventurous, and I came so many times that eventually I figured all this stuff out for myself. But it took years longer than it should have if I'd had that mentor there in place to say, okay, we're going to go here, here, here. These are the people I know, blah, blah, blah. This is how the local culture works. And, he's able to communicate, or I'm able to communicate in the local languages. Maybe not in Estonian, Latvian, and Lithuanian yet, but In most of them, we can get by with English, and some places Russian is very useful, especially in Riga. Also in some places in Tallinn, it's the main lingua franca, but I don't think it's as necessary in Tallinn or as advantageous as it is in Riga, especially if you go to the higher end places to socialize. And you will be there with me. You'll have an unforgettable time, and we will work on any of the blind spots you have in terms of communication, create a social circle, help you figure out, and through the experience of going rather than the theory, about what would be the best fit for you in the region, and help you leverage the lifestyle arbitrage that's available. Because if there wasn't any friction, if it was frictionless, there'd be no arbitrage, and the market would work perfectly. And again, I guess if you're a billionaire, it doesn't really matter. I mean, I've had centimillionaires as clients, so I can't say that maybe a billionaire wouldn't. If there's a billionaire watching, then also apply. Please also apply. Don't want to put you off. But jokes aside, yeah. I mean, some guys go and they're a famous male model who's a billionaire. Well, then you probably would need my help less, especially if you're not considering the region somewhere that you would at least travel to regularly. Those are the guys that are really going to get the most benefit, rather than a one-off trip, wife hunting because you have no options back home. Probably I can help you with the AI for sure. That's probably the best bit if you are one of those guys, because then I can answer all your discrete questions through the New Europe Insider AI. It's available for €29 per month, so about $34, I guess that is, or maybe it's $33 US per month. And then you can go and ask all your questions. It's pretty phenomenal the way it answers. It's not quite as good as me in person, if we were on a consulting call, especially for edge cases, and there's a lot of nuances that obviously it doesn't get, but it's pretty impressive. Way better than ChatGPT, which I think gets you about 20 or 30% of the way. It's still worth looking at. I did experiment, I was building the AI, and just of something to help people if they come to my website to direct them. And I realized it's way too good, so I said, okay, limit it and make it like, 40-50% helpful. And then we have the New Europe Insider AI, which is the subscription service, and that will get you about 80% of the way. Even better if you bought my guides, and as I said, I may create an extra tier to also provide that information. I'll get up to about 90%. So then if you need the consulting, or you just don't want to bother with the AI, you just think simply to hop on a consulting call with me, you can obviously invest in that down below. But if you're one of these guys who have all these dating questions and stuff, it's probably the best thing to do. It's not a training. So back in the day, I used to run my training programs like Slavic Seduction Secrets, Slavic Scambuster Secrets. We had the programs for moving to the region for Ukraine, Russia, Belarus. Not that we'll be going back to Russia, Belarus anytime soon. I also had Kazakhstan. I tried one for Moldova. Didn't really work very well, but the others, they did work pretty well in terms of the group. Their advantage is you had a training program that was specific for a certain amount of time, and you had the community aspect. So it's a bit different when you have the AI, because you're asking discrete questions. It's there 24/7, and it is helpful for like the way that people are starting to use just the general AIs, whether it's Grok or Claude or ChatGPT that you decide to use. So it shows. To me, also made me think about the limitations when I'm asking ChatGPT stuff, because if I were planning to move here and I use ChatGPT, yes, it's better than Google. Google gets you like 10% of the way. This ChatGPT gets you like 20, 25% of the way. Then with this, it gets you 80% of the way already. So price will go up on Monday, midnight, Eastern Standard Time, so New York time. It's available for those guys that are the founding members that are going to obviously, we're going to do a beta, for 1 week just to refine it and stuff together. And then for obviously the guys who will get in at this price, I'm not going to raise their price afterwards. About month 2 or something, they will have that price for that tier at least guaranteed. So I'm going to get in on it now and get it. I don't know what price point I'm going to put it after I go through the beta testing phase. I mean, that should be very quick. I just need to get guys feedback, see if there's any major issues. And because anyways, if people find issues afterwards, you can correct it very quickly when you're designing the AI. You just feed it in instructions. So if there's some issue afterwards, and what I mean issue, I mean it can be refined to make better, then I can just type that in. It doesn't take very long. It's not like there's a major process. So not sure what price point yet I'm going to put it at, whether we make it 39, 49, 59 euros per month. Afterwards, I'll have to think about that. But for now, it's 29 euros down below. So go sign up for that if you are so inclined. And otherwise, you can always get a consulting call with me. That's available down below. or if you want to do it in person, you want to have me with you, like many of my clients have done. It's particularly if you're going to check out a few cities and you think that, okay, you don't want to go there on your own, or you don't want to go with the people you know, you'd rather have me with you. It can also be here in Ukraine. It's not just for going to Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, to Warsaw in Poland, Chișinău, Moldova, and Almaty and Astana in Kazakhstan. You can also come here to Ukraine. It's going to be a little bit different. Not going to be as much nightlife, although that is changing, to be frank. Maybe I can give you an update in Ukraine. We did have a few attacks with drones, but since this Operation Epic Fury started, it's been noticeable that there are a lot less drone attacks in Ukraine on civilian targets. The weather also changed. The weather is nicer now, so I don't know what conclusions to draw exactly. Could be that Russia's sending lots of drones to attack America, Israel, and its allies in the Middle East. I don't know if that's happening, but what I can say is, looking out my window, we definitely have a lot less drone attacks here in Ukraine in general. They still happen, but not here in Odesa as much as before. Weather has changed. I think it's going to be a fantastic summer in Ukraine, as strange as that sounds. I think at the nightlife, we do have curfew, but because we'll have the long summer months, long summer evenings, relative to now, and the weather being nicer, I think people just start socializing a lot earlier. It's going to be fantastic down here, and especially in June, July in Odesa. Already the nightlife is pretty good in Lviv. You can basically party all night in Lviv if you want. And that city has grown since 2022 because a lot of people relocated there. A lot of people from Kyiv or from further east relocated to Lviv. So socializing in Lviv, it's pretty good. And you don't have the hordes of the horny foreigners chasing the girls. So again, this is the arbitrage opportunity that if you decide to come to Ukraine, with the obvious caveat that it's going to be a time of war, there's a certain risk. Statistically, it's not high that you're going to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. It's like 1 in a million per day, basically per capita being in the city. And I don't think you should come here if your only interest is in dating, because that's a pretty shallow reason to be here at this time. If you want to support Ukrainians, spend money in the economy, promote Ukraine, and keep it in the news feeds of your family, friends, or anyone else you can influence, then definitely come. Even more kudos to you if you're going to help with the humanitarian effort. Actually, I'm starting to notice a lot more Western women here. When I say Western, we're also Western here. So we'll say Western European or North American women here in Odesa in the last few months, helping with international organizations, with aid organizations. Kind of interesting to see that. An Irish guy actually celebrated Paddy's Day. So I did go to an Irish pub. There wasn't much going on, to be frank, on Paddy's Day. It was Tuesday in Odesa in the winter. Well, spring. The winter's already over. But there was actually an Irish guy in the pub, and he came over and he heard my voice. I wouldn't say I have a very strong Irish accent, and he wanted to know to watch the soccer because there's a big match coming up between Ireland and Czechia to qualify for the World Cup, or to get further along the qualification process. So yeah, I was chatting to him, and he was working with these aid organizations. So when I meet up with him, if I end up meeting up for the match on Thursday, I'm going to ask him a little bit more about why I see these Western European women in particular, some Americans as well, recently in Odesa. But basically, if you have these arbitrage opportunities, then everything's lower exposure, and you can be that kind of more shiny, rare thing in Ukraine, especially if you're from an allied country and supporting Ukraine, which I assume, if you're watching this channel, is you. It's probably not 100%, unfortunately, but for the vast majority, then it's going to be a pretty good time to come to Ukraine. In that sense, if you're helping here, providing value, then yeah, I mean, basically, the situation is, especially if you don't speak Ukrainian or Russian, then, most girls are not going to be interested in a foreigner. I think probably more now, because more of them have lived abroad, they're a little bit more open-minded, and, it's time of war, we're allied with Ukraine in these dark days of struggle. So if you're coming now and you don't have the hundreds of thousands, like guys who think, and I hear this a lot of guys, Conor, I'm definitely coming back after the war. It's like, UN, hundreds of thousands of other men are going to flood in here. The men are also coming back. The Ukrainian men are going to come back from the front, the ones that are fighting. And they're going to have, I would guess, in the higher status than they have before, having fought on the front. Okay, some of them tragically will have passed away. Obviously, they won't be coming back. And many men will have psychological trauma, and some certain number will be invalid. But those guys are going to come back. And there's going to be just like hundreds of thousands of guys coming. You're going to have the scammy, the dodgy marriages, the ones that are dodgy, saying that there are no Ukrainian men left because they all got killed in the war. They're just going to lie like that because they already more or less did it when the fighting started back in 2022, one of them in particular. And you had a lot of just online scams claiming that the Ukrainian women are fleeing as refugees and they just want to marry anyone, all this kind of BS. So I'm sure there will be the similar kind of scammy marketing, at least for the first few months. And all these desperado guys will come thinking that it's going to be El Dorado for dating Ukrainian women when they get there. And then they're all going to be disappointed, or it's going to get out that they got scammed. And then we won't see as many come. That's kind of my prediction right now looking at it. So if you're interested in coming, come now, as long as you're okay with the statistical risk, which is very low, and the psychological impact it's going to have, because you are going to hear alerts, you may hear alert explosions, you may see things blown up. On the other channel, which I've now renamed, you can go and find a link to it down below. I did go and film in front of a building that had been hit here in the center. I was on, I think, Tuesday or Wednesday I filmed it. So I filmed a little reportage there. I'm going to change the style. Maybe on Wednesday I'm going to get around to filming for that again, because I'm doing a lot of work on the lifestyle channel in the last few weeks, and also on the Ukrainian program. I was working on module 1, putting in the feedback this evening, so I'm going to circulate probably module 2 for the beta group tomorrow. And then once I have the feedback from that, we're going to start the live streams finally, hopefully finally, in a week or 2 at the most. We're going to start those. So once I've uncovered the feedback, I think we'll look up 2 modules out. So at that point we can start them. So go and subscribe if you're interested on more reportage from the ground here in Ukraine. Geopolitics going a lot deeper than what I do on these lifestyle. Then you can go there, and it's called Conor Clyne Inside Ukraine is what I renamed it, right? I think I need to pull it up and actually look for myself. Since I've got my name, I think I put it Inside Ukraine is the name of what I rebrand. Yeah, Inside Ukraine. There we go. So different style I'm going to try for that. And let me just say that, yeah, there's this term, it's like alpha decay. And it's kind of like when you have information asymmetry and it goes away. So let's take it with trading. If there's there are many strategies that people use for investment that work in the beginning, but then when word gets out what they're doing, all this other money comes in and it gets rid of the arbitrage. There's no more arbitrage left, right? So you lose it. So it's kind of alpha decay is what I think it's called. I looked up for some descriptions of how to describe this. So, for example, while in Ukraine, if you're a foreign guy and you come here, in particular if you don't speak Ukrainian or Russian, and while I'd like to think you have another reason to come other than chasing girls, but either way, we'll say you come here. Now you have that, I guess, information asymmetry advantage because most guys aren't going to come. But as soon as the fighting ends, it's just going to be flooded and you're going to lose your advantage. So you want these asymmetries to exist so you can leverage them in terms of lifestyle arbitrage. It can be the price point of the country where you're going to get, as long as you have your revenue set up so you can access them remotely. You don't have to be based all the time here, of course. You can be just coming regularly, like what I used to do when I was a lawyer, just travel here. And Brazil, I used to travel at every opportunity, just hop on a plane and come. You're going to get the geographical, you need an arbitrage, right? So geo-maxing, right? That's where we're talking to come. And there are lots of barriers to that, like cost of travel, the distance, the time in coming. I actually see, because I mentioned Antoine noted in one of his live streams, he has a matchmaking agency, Sekouni, it's in French, that now he gets more requests from guys who are not interested in coming to the region. They don't even want to emigrate a girl from here, even though they're wife hunting. They actually want a woman who's already in the country, presumably already has a green card if it's America, right? So she's already done the green card shenanigans, probably used some poor schmuck to get there. They just don't want to have to travel or take the time. They're not interested in the country that she comes from. They're just interested in the woman, either because basically because they have a fetish, because Ukrainian women in particular, it's the fetishization in the marketing with the Ukrainian brides industry. Basically described as traditional women. They're not traditional, but we won't go into that discussion again. They're not like women from the 1950s in the US for sure. Maybe at a stretch the 1990s, 2000s, maybe about this kind of time era. Maybe. And because they are, promoted in that way, then these guys are interested. I mean, I was thinking it'd be like, what would we call a website if it was something like find a lovely Latina locally.com or something like that? Will we say that's a fetish site? I mean, you're so specific about, Latinas, and you can have your preferences. I'm not trying to shame anyone if they just want to be with, I mean, now they're not really Ukrainians, they're probably going to be from somewhere else in the region anyways, a lot of them. But we'll say Russian-speaking women, because I think that's probably the main nexus between them in general, because the marketing that these Ukrainian private businesses now do to try and find women is, most of it seems to be in Russian, and it's basically outside of Ukraine. They seem to be targeting that way, so it's probably going to be a lot of Belarusians and Russians and people, maybe even from the Baltics, who are going to be coming into them. So we see that happening more and more, but you have no arbitrage opportunity there. Absolutely none. You're telling the woman's already there, right? So you don't have to worry about her using for your green card, unless she's about to get deported. And she's looking for, maybe you also have that risk. Be careful. Because I was thinking earlier, when I lived in the US, it was back in 2004, 2005, maybe did I arrive already in 2003? And I had a fling with a Bulgarian girl, a very pretty girl, who was the sister of a friend. And she went a little bit cold on me. And then all of a sudden, the friend, she told me, she was about to get deported, but it's all good. She's now pregnant, and the guy's going to marry her. So I was like, great. I'm glad to hear that. She didn't answer my messages for the last 3 months, your sister, but I'm glad it worked out. She found some poor schmuck to, well, I hope it worked out from the end. I didn't follow him, I actually am still friends with her sister on Facebook, at least. I'm still in contact, but I haven't spoken to her for a decade, but should ask if she's still with the guy that was her ticket to staying in the country. So someone like that, definitely be aware of, but presumably they got the residency reasons out of the way for being with some guy. So, but you don't have any arbitrage opportunity. She's surrounded by all these other guys that have the exact same profile to you, more or less. So the big question is, why would you even be at such an age? But the main point I want to make is like so many red flags if she goes to marriage agency and she's already living in Germany, but she can't find a man. It's kind of weird, with a similar profile, unless she wants to re-immigrate somewhere else, which I think a lot of them maybe want to do. They're not happy where they are. That's why they would go to such a service. But it says I don't want to talk about that so much as it's not really relevant to coming here hardly at all nowadays. You don't have any arbitrage opportunity there. If you come here, and I'm also thinking about one of my clients, he commented, he sent me a Brazilian YouTuber, because Conor is Brazilian, and this guy has a Lithuanian girlfriend, and he's been traveling a lot in the region and making these videos. And yeah, my client was commenting, wow, if you were here in the States, I couldn't see that guy having such a pretty girlfriend. And I was thinking, man, living in this region, I don't think it's unusual at all. I was like, they look around the same level, to be frank, because I made that video a few years ago. I didn't get so many views, but I think it's very valuable to watch. It's linked down below. And it's the first video in the playlist I have for dating the model level beauty-wise women in this region. You can go and check it out down below. But basically, if you take a woman, we all understand the scale 1 to 10 more or less, right? It's based on looks. It doesn't mean that that's the only thing we judge women on, but because we're more visually focused, it's kind of the first thing we notice, at least before we can judge if she's good fit in terms of values and other things, and whether logistics are realistic. But if we look pure beauty, if we take a woman who's saying 6 here or 6 in Lithuania, and she goes further west, she becomes a 7 or an 8, probably 7 already by the time she's in Poland. By the time she gets to the United Kingdom, she's probably an 8. Maybe by the time she gets to the US, she's even higher than that. Who knows? Depends where it is. A small town, lost in the Midwest somewhere, then she's probably 9. So that is an arbitrage opportunity because there's geographical limitation. If you come and spend time here, I did have cases back in 2019 with Juan, for example, where he came with me for a few days, but he'd actually been in the region for a few weeks. And it worked out. He met his wife, very pretty woman, in terms of beauty for sure. And they're still together last time I checked. I should write him a message. I forgot to write a message of last live stream. But, Juan was so charismatic and he had so much luck, to be honest, on that trip, because he met her at a club that I normally don't even bring clients to because I didn't like it so much. I thought with clients, and I brought him places that I thought with him he would fit better. But it's clear when we were there, these weren't the spots for him. We brought him to the club, more commercial club. Yeah, he met his wife one night out at the commercial club, and it you can have serendipity happens every once in a while. But in hindsight, if I look at my clients over many years, the ones who did the best, and Juan did extremely well. I'm sure if my client who commented on the Brazilian YouTuber doing very well that he's with this Lithuanian girl, if he'd seen Juan with his wife, he'd have said, wow, how, I think she may even be taller than Juan. Like, Juan wasn't super tall, but he was super charismatic, man. He had no approach anxiety, he did not care, man. He spoke to everybody with such good vibe. Yeah, he was really a lot of fun to go on that trip. Philip was also there at the time. So, we all spoke in Spanish, I remember. It was like a lot of fun. But now that I have so much more data, in general, the guys did the best. They spent a while, they built up time and they understood the culture. Even better if they learned the local language. But the key thing is they spent time, built up their social circle, and they did, yeah, remarkably well. That's why some of my clients end up marrying or starting families with models, as I was saying. Definitely disproportionately. Let me go look at the latest questions and comments. Now I'll come back to some other points. We've been on for 100 minutes at this point, this stage. Let's see, let's go back over. There are a lot of comments that come in. And I have to scroll back to find the last comment. Okay. Just saying both wars will be posted. Yes, there will be. Post-traumatic stress disorder will be a big issue also in Ukraine. Maybe already an issue already to a certain extent. And soldiers taking drugs also in their front line. But I hear through the grapevine it's also a bit of an issue. And obviously alcohol, all these things with the intensity of combat and the trauma of it. Let me go down. In Narva, average salary, yeah, we already talked about that. What are the chances? Okay, I've already cut. Don is there. Hey, Don from Los Angeles. In Narva, hospital is 560 beds and even got it 112. Okay. Lasname is the Russian hood of talent. Donas, are the Lithuanians taller ladies? Yes. I think the average height of women is about 169, and we're talking about women who are younger. So we don't take the whole population, we'll say under 35, then it's going to be more than 169 centimeters, so or 170. I'm 178, which is 5'10" for comparison. I don't remember all these feet and inches anymore. Being Irish, we don't use them as much as we used to. Thomas says Ukraine, but it's unclear what he's talking about. General asks me, of the three countries, which language is the easiest, hardest to learn between Latvian, Estonian, and Lithuanian? And are there any commonalities between the three languages? Oof. Lithuanian, Latvian, yes, there is an overlap in terms of vocabulary and structure. They're vaguely related, being both Baltic languages. Estonian sounds nothing like Latvian and Lithuanian. It is similar to Finnish. It is Finno-Ugric in terms of linguistic heritage. So yeah, you're not going to understand hardly anything from learning Estonian if you go and try and learn Latvian or Lithuanian. But with Latvian and Lithuanian, there is a little bit of overlap. I don't think it's huge though. So does that answer the question? Yes, I think so. But they're all equally hard or easy to learn if you don't speak a cognate language. So if you don't speak Finnish and you don't speak one of the other Baltic languages for Latvian and Lithuanian, they're all going to be equally hard. It's going to take many years to learn them. Best in Class says, young Russians live in Tallinn and Tartu are bilingual and are citizens. Not much interest in the war up in mobile, I would think so. Jeff says, turning 64 in less than a month, looking at Latvia for a retirement visa once I turn 65. May do Romania or Slovenia before then. Plan on eventually buying in Latvia. Thoughts on 12-month residency horizon. Sounds pretty good, Jeff. Probably should invest in either the New Europe Insider AI, or if you want to jump on a consulting call, then we can set that up and we can discuss your plan for relocating and retiring in the region. Yeah, definitely. You would get a lot of value out of yeah, my services. So Don just gives me a pitch, just next comment. You get what you paid for. If you're high value, then Conor's a guy. Yeah, gonna just save you a lot of time, money, and wasted emotions, especially if you're single. In the wrong women. Little says the problem with Warsaw is that it's boring, especially in winter. I mean, it's a big city of 2-3 million people. I couldn't really call it boring. I think Polish society is a bit more conservative in general. Just the Polish culture, maybe not as exciting or spontaneous. But Warsaw is going to be about as exciting as it gets because it's like a little less conservative there. You think that Lithuania is the best of three? I would say no. For me, it's probably the... If I were to say Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, which is the most boring? I would say Lithuania, actually. It's the least going on there. But I think my client came with me a lot to the... He's been to Poland, he's been to Latvia, he's been to Lithuania, he's been to Estonia with me. He got on the best with Lithuanian women. Interesting. I also have him, I would say per day, yes. I think Lithuanians probably get on with the most, kind of. But it's a lot more fun to hang out in Riga. And marginally probably Tallinn too. I have great memories. I met a lot of Ukrainians also in Tallinn. It's pretty cool. General says, does the dollar go further in Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia than in Poland or Ukraine right now? No, it doesn't. The price point is pretty comparable between Poland, Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia. Of course, there are some small changes, 10% here and there. Ukraine, on the other hand, is about half, maybe even half the price. We had a little bit of inflation recently. So my flat white has gone up in price. And it's gone up, I pay what, about 115 hryvnia from 100 hryvnia. So it's gone up 15% in the last couple of months. So now, because I always tip 10%, I'm now paying like €2.40, €2.50. But if I go to Tallinn and I don't tip, it's probably going to be about €3.60, yeah, somewhere between €3.30 and €3.90. If I go to Warsaw, and yeah, I pay over €4. €4.20. It's not that much cheaper than being in Ireland, to be frank. And Ireland would also pay €4.50 to €5. So there you can see the price points, what I drink all the time. Let me go back up. Best in class is Estonia and Lithuania are the prettiest in his opinion. I went to Vilnius recently. Wow. I think we're talking about the creme de la creme in terms of female beauty. That's why it is the highest number of catwalk models per capita in the world. It's in those three countries. There isn't much obesity amongst young people there, over 40 years. So, yeah, I think the average, I think there's just a lot more model-like beauty in those countries than there is on average here in Ukraine or in Belarus or in Russia. Of course, if you go to a big city like Kyiv is huge, so if you go to top places there with a lot of single women that, yeah, they're kind of flooding or to those areas, so there could be higher concentration because the city is bigger. Same in Moscow back in the day. Same to a certain extent in Minsk, a little bit less. But if we're looking at like model beauty, yeah, it's in higher concentration in the three Baltic states. In terms of values, it can actually, because I had this consulting client, and he was saying that the cultural difference with Ukrainians is a little bit too much for him. Saying what I think he was hanging out. I won't say he was hanging out, but yeah, where was he? Now I remember where he's hanging out. Yeah, he was in Malta. I don't think it's a problem to say that. So he was in Malta, and he found the cultural differences between his culture being Western European and Ukrainians to be still a little bit of a gulf. He said he actually prefers women who are Central European, so like Czech, Slovak, Polish, and from Latvia, Lithuania. He said they're just more Europeanized, whilst Ukraine, we have this process. And I think, as I said on some of these other live streams, like the generations here go twice as quickly as they do in Western Europe. So we might say there's a generational difference after 15 years. Say if you're in Britain or Ireland, the US, France, Germany, but here it's like 7-8 years. You can see a difference. So yeah, the latest generation of Ukrainians, the difference is narrowing, definitely. And probably with the new Iron Curtain, you know, people on the other side are going to be way different to Ukrainians within another decade. They probably won't have much in common anymore, a bit like probably being in, you know, Latvia Lithuania, Estonia, if you're ethnically Latvian, Lithuanian, Estonian, there's probably nothing in common, very little in common with the Moscow people from Moscow nowadays. Whilst, and I think this will happen here, it's going to accelerate in the next few years. So yeah, for him, he actually preferred being in countries like that than say necessarily. I mean, we also got a war here, so that's another consideration in Ukraine. But he could go to Warsaw and hit on Ukrainians or Belarusians, but he actually prefers that they're a little bit closer in culture. It's a better fit for him. So the other things to take on board. It's not all just about the prettiest, for example, even though I'm apparently a model maxer, as I was described. Is it difficult to understand the Cyrillic alphabet? No, you learn that very quickly. There are a few, like the R letter, so like or in English, that's looks like a P. So a few things are confusing in the beginning, but really, if you use it a lot, a week, and you'll understand the alphabet. Don says, unfortunately, his ancestors didn't teach Polish or Ukrainian. They assimilated into English, the language of the United States. Yes, even though it's not an official language, or did Trump change that? Yeah, that was the assimilation that happened in the US. It wasn't integration, it was more assimilation, especially in the 19th century and 20th century. So people didn't pass on the language. Unless there was a huge number of them. A little bit with Poles, I think, in Chicago, and Italians a little bit in Boston. It's North End, is that the place where the Italians are? I went there. And yeah, I guess Spanish speakers, there's a lot to keep it going because there's just so many of them. They can keep that community and that language going. But others, like, disappeared and they intermarried. Best in class is his Estonian girlfriend is 5'8" and thin. So that would make her about what, 173 centimeters. That's just kind of like a standard Estonian model. General says, is the attitude towards Americans different with the recent war in Iran? Can't really say what's the impact here in Ukraine, since I've been only in Ukraine since this operation started. I think, was I in Chișinău when it started? I think I just come back from Chișinău to Odesa. So yeah, I mean, basically Iran is allied with Russia. So if the US is hitting Iran, I don't think people have less of an opinion of America overall. Unfortunately, this is, I guess, an occasion where I'm rooting for Donald Trump to be successful with Iran because they're allied with Russia, so for sure. But yeah, there doesn't seem to be a plan. A lack of strategic seriousness with this administration is just shocking. Shocking. Real estate developers leading diplomatic attempts, and it all goes wrong. Same with the Russo-Ukrainian war. Yeah, it's bewildering. I'm sure that historians in the future are going to be baffled by this administration. But anyways, let's hope that they're successful from Ukraine's point of view. Is 40 too old to go clubbing? I'm 47. I don't think it is. So I think it depends on how you look, and you know, how there's a lot of factors. How you look, how you're groomed, how you're styled. Do you fit in an environment? Someone asked me recently about, oh yeah, if you look creepy if you go to the student club at 50. Or I think he even said 40. Depends what you look like. I brought a client who was 23 to a student club in Warsaw. It was actually a Ukrainian Belarusian one. We went to 2 or 3 of them because I thought you wouldn't be taken seriously by the girls at the normal clubs we go to because they expect the guys to be at least 25 or older. And no one seemed to have a problem with me there. Any of the Ukrainian Belarusian girls, they were super friendly. So I think it just depends on your company, because I was obviously with someone who was younger, and how you present yourself, your confidence. Yeah, I don't think it is at all. And I love electronic music, and I go to a lot of electronic music parties, both here in Odesa, even now, even all-night ones. Bit rare, but Chișinău during summer is fantastic. And yeah, so I don't think it is. So that's my answer, Joshua. Don says, it's going to be miserable in Los Angeles. It will be 35 Celsius all summer. Last week it was 30, 35. Wow. Don says, get an education. Watch Conor's old videos going back 5 years. You will learn a lot. Yes, you can go. I have playlists down below. Also, I have the resources page that you can go to, and there you can also go and take a look at the playlists I put together. Will the Belarusian gap close? Do you mean the Suwałki gap in Poland and Lithuania with Kaliningrad to Belarus? Josh, just explain what you mean there. Rogan, another Josh. Well, Conor, so who are you pulling for in the Iran versus US/Israel conflict? I think I've already said that Iran is allied with with Russia, and Russia, from what we can tell, is currently assisting Iran in targeting and killing American troops and their allies and people in the Middle East, in places like Dubai. So you can tell who I'm pulling for. Would I have advised Donald Trump, with my background in international relations, to conduct this operation the way he has? Absolutely not. I think he just got carried away because of the success with the abduction of Maduro, to think he'd just go in and kill the Ayatollah. And I know what they were thinking. They don't seem to have a proper plan when something doesn't go according to plan A. They don't have a plan B, it seems. They just seem to be making it up on the fly. So they're incompetent, but I'm still rooting for them because I have a personal interest in them being successful. Joshua says, get Bessarabian Gap. What was the original question? Bessarabian Gap. Not sure what you mean by Bessarabian Gap. Thanks, Conor. The residency is real estate is real estate. Once you get there, one has to go. Okay, sounds good. Yes, that gap. I'm not sure what you mean by the Bessarabian Gap. Do you mean Transnistria? The region, unrecognized. And I don't think it will last much longer as a de facto separatist entity either. There's actually, that was one of the things on my list for developments, was actually the Moldovan government. There was a plan leaked to a Moldovan journalist that the government has a plan for unification, de facto unification. Let me find where it was. Yes, a governmental plan to reintegrate Transnistria into Moldova de facto. And let me read what it is. The strategy emphasizes that reunification should align with the country's European integration course. At the same time, the document allows for a scenario in which EU law on the left bank, that means Transnistria, could be temporarily suspended during Moldova's formal accession to European Union. So there's a precedent for this, which is Cyprus. Cyprus joined the European Union back in 2004. Even though the island is divided, you have a de facto separatist entity in the north of the island, only recognized by Turkey, called, I can't remember what it's even called, it's called the Northern Cyprus Turkish Republic, maybe is the name. And I've been there. I crossed over in Nicosia. Take a look on the other side. So basically the EU has this acquis communautaire, that's the French term for the laws of the European Union, and they are actually suspended in Northern Cyprus, in this de facto Turkish-backed separatist republic. So that would be the precedent, and maybe they will do that with Transnistria if they haven't figured out how to reintegrate. Cyprus, 22 years now after they joined the European Union, still not unified, not even looking like it's even closer. New generation of people have grown up with the border. The Greek Cypriots rejected the plan for unification, in part because they thought they would get a better deal once they're inside. Didn't materialize, stupid idea in hindsight. And the biggest complaint I heard from them was that the Turkish troops would get to stay for about 2 decades. I can't remember how many years it was over 20 years, around 20 years or something. Now we're 22 years later, and the Turkish troops are still there. So obviously they screwed up, because the Turkish part, the northern part, they accepted the unification deal. So yeah, the Greek Cypriots made a huge mistake at the time. But they were all the Turkish Greek Cypriots I knew at the time, they were adamant, no, we will get a better deal. No, we can't have the Turkish troops there. And I said, like, just take the deal and move on. That's a time where Donald Trump could actually say, make a deal, because he's not dealing with Russia, with Vladimir Putin or the Russian Empire. Other developments, there was an oil spill. As Russia hit I think they hit a hydroelectric station just inside Ukraine on the border with Moldova that feeds into that's on the Dniester River. So that's affected the water supply in Moldova. Hasn't affected Chișinău, it's affected cities like Belts in the north. So Russia causing more problems in the region. Germany, for the first time since the fall of the Berlin Wall, now it has more Poles leaving the country than coming in. Such has been the extent of Polish economic growth that now you have a net number of Poles leaving to go back to Poland than actually emigrating to Germany. So interesting. Poland is on track, once again, to overtake Brexit Britain in terms of GDP per capita, PPS. Well, Donald Tusk, the Prime Minister, said by 2030. I think that's an exaggeration. By 2035, of the current trajectory, for sure, they will overtake the United Kingdom. They will probably also overtake the former East Germany, not Germany as a whole, but the former East Germany in that time period. So pretty impressive Polish economic development. And I also left a comment under a video about moving to Croatia, because it made me think. I promote countries in one part of New Europe, even though obviously the title is the New Europe experience. It's basically the parts that all have a border with Russian Federation or some Russian-backed de facto separatist enclave, like Moldova, for example. Kazakhstan's a border, Ukraine is a border. Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, and Poland all have a border with the Russian Federation. In Poland's case, it's with Kaliningrad, the ex-slave, same with Lithuania. And, well, I guess Romania I filmed in as well, even though I haven't brought clients in person there. So I do also promote Romania to a certain extent, but a lot less than the other parts. And I will also gladly promote Czechia. But, for example, I don't go to the Balkans, like the former Yugoslavia. I don't go to Serbia. I don't go to Croatia. So I was thinking about what is Croatia. It's like Italy light with a Southern Slavic flavor. And, you know, it's been in the European Union since 2013. It's more economically developed. And I just find the Balkans, the culture, the food, it's a little bit less my preference. I think the weather is pretty good, though. That's one thing. And I was last in Croatia late 2019. No, was it 2019? Yeah, it was just before COVID. So price point is going to be a little bit cheaper than being in Western Europe, but not a huge amount. It's pretty much a mainstream tourist destination to go to Dubrovnik or to go to Zagreb. There's nothing really like a hidden gem. I don't think you have as much leverage going there, especially if you're a single guy. It's probably why I don't recommend it as much. I think it's great in a couple. It's more appealing, and I see that a lot online. There's a lot more American couples, for example, that are interested in going to Albania, going to Croatia, going to Serbia, than single guys. With the invasion 2022, some of my clients and some of my friends did go to that part of Europe, to hang out in Montenegro, to hang out in Serbia, and they were all very disappointed as single guys. So, yes, there are attractive women, as many as here, probably not as many as Poland, maybe. They also tend to be tall, by the way, which I like. And I had a fantastic time as a single guy in Novi Sad, not in Belgium, in Novi Sad back in the day. It's over 10 years ago when I was there. But in general, yeah, price point, not as attractive as being here, for example. And culturally, find it a bit more difficult in the Balkans. People are, yeah, maybe I just didn't gel with them as well as I did with people here. It's also true that I learned the languages here, so maybe that also influenced my opinion. But I think it's pretty similar to being in Italy. I mean, they have a lot of the same architecture. If you go to Croatia, the beaches, they don't have as much sand. I remember it's like more stony beaches. But now the price points are kind of, it's obviously less than Italy, starting to catch up. So your arbitrage, I'm not seeing it huge there. A little bit more than being in Italy. Probably a little bit more relaxed than being in Italy, especially Croatia. But yeah, probably a good option for some people. This guy whose video is reacting to, he's in a couple, he has a Ukrainian girlfriend. So yeah, it just made me think a little bit why I don't, recommend Montenegro. And I think that's beautiful there. Just don't think you get the same lifestyle leverage in terms of arbitrage than you do by coming to this part. It's because it's more mainstream and it's more touristic in those places. The countries that I normally recommend, you have more leverage because they're less tourists. There are a lot of tourists during the summer who go to the historic old towns of Tallinn and Vilnius and to Riga. I see more and more videos from female solo travelers or couples travelers going there, and definitely you can see it in historic centers. But once you step outside of that, yeah, it's pretty much untouched in these countries. Croatia, I just didn't feel it was the same vibe when I was there. It's pleasant, and I would go on a trip as a couple, or when I had business, that's why I was there, but it's just not my area of operations in general. Other things I wanted to comment on before I get back to your comments and questions, keep them coming there. Scamming in the region. It's a lot less than back in the day, because I was also thinking about my program, Slavic Scambuster Secrets. Like, would I launch that kind of program today? No, because I don't think it's as big of an issue as it used to be. Obviously, you still have the PPL scams online, I guess. I don't really hear about them as much as I used to. Like 5-6 years ago, they were a huge issue. I think just technology and the development of, like, I even get ads now, not just for an AI girlfriend, but for a Ukrainian AI girlfriend. So I guess a lot of the guys who get sucked into the PPL, they're probably just going to pay for that, and then it's not a scam. Other scams, I mean, here, got women using Tinder or a dating app to meet a guy and then bring him to a restaurant, and, you know, they get a kickback from him and overcharged, sometimes for hundreds of euros. It doesn't happen. There aren't the victims, the potential victims coming here so much. I think the scammer girls probably left. They're not. There's martial law, so they wouldn't get away with it. I think nowadays in Ukraine doing that would be very low probability. In other places like Poland, the scams I've seen, strip clubs. I don't go to strip clubs personally. Not interested in them. I think it's the ultimate simping. That's just my opinion, and I don't recommend my clients going to them. However, it does happen in Poland that people are drugged or people get too excited and they get fleeced at the strip club, so don't go to strip clubs. I did hear about 1 or 2 scams in Moldova, online scams, but again, guys contact me probably as much about Moldova as they do about Ukrainians and scams nowadays, and it's a lot less than it was 5 years ago. I just think it's an interesting development, and the countries that countries like Lithuania, Latvian, Estonia don't have so many scams. I think they had a bit of scamming with the kind of strip club stuff. Maybe they have girls actually at the entrance to Riga Old Town. There is a bar where there are always women just happen to be loitering outside who are very chatty. And I think the idea is that someone told me that they went there and then they realized that the girls just wanted him to buy a drink inside. And he realized that one drink he's probably been had. I was like, man, that's pretty obvious. But anyways, okay. The drink was a bit overpriced, but it is Riga Old Town. So you might see that. It's kind of a very low-level scam compared to what happened on these trips, either here or in St. Petersburg back in the day in 2019, where it was just like crazy scamming. A lot less of an issue in any of the countries I recommend now. Kazakhstan, I don't think it exists. Maybe it would in some touristic hotel, maybe, but I don't think it's an issue. So yeah, that's one good thing about this region nowadays. I hear the error alert because I turned them off my phone. Let me just see what the error alert is about. Do I get a notification here? So when you come to Ukraine, the different Telegram channels are going to tell you about what it is. Let me just look here. Okay, so we're going to have a lot of, it might be noisy pretty soon. There are a lot of drones coming in. Over 20 of them, and some of them coming up here to the center probably. So I may need to end this live stream if it gets very noisy, or make an assessment on the threat level, but in general, that's just what you get used to being here. Other thing that came up, always be skeptical in terms of people being competitive in terms of romance. We'll call it. Let's go. So someone told me that they'd heard about a lot of Polish women kind of slut shaming, inverted commas, Ukrainian women. Let's be frank about it. Ukrainian women average are better looking than Polish women average. Bit of competition, and I don't think that there's a huge difference in terms of promiscuity between the both of them. So I would ignore that and always interpret it that maybe that's how, in general, women try to lower the perceived value of the competition by saying that they're promiscuous, because they know that that works in terms of lowering the value of women in men's eyes in general. Just a reality. So always be skeptical about that. Another funny thing I saw, there's like some feminist was on talking about pleasure travel, where basically she goes to travel and hook up with the local men. It's not, she said that basically the way she framed it was that she was doing pleasure travel, not sex tourism, which I found funny. But sex tourism is when you pay for sex. That's actually the definition according to the UN. So she was right. It just sounded funny that she described this in such glowing terms, right? But the whole time, because I'm not exploiting anyone. But I'm sure with this radical feminist mindset, if she sees a guy doing the same thing, and she's so generous in her description like that, I just find it amusing. That's apparently the word. I call it romance tourism when it's not paying women, basically. When these guys travel, I think it's a pretty normal thing. Don't think it should be the only reason you travel somewhere. It's pretty shallow. It's not, you're not going to get the full experience, but as long as you're not breaking any laws and not doing anything immoral, then what can I say? Well, I guess morality is a little bit relative there. Any other final points before I get back to your... No, I'm going to save the last two on my list and go back to your questions and comments. Keep them coming in. Again, a reminder that my New Europe AI, Insider AI, there's the opportunity to get in on it, 29 euros per month. And I'm going to be rolling out the full version. Then afterwards, this offer will last at 29 euros per month. So that's a little bit over 30 US dollars until Monday, midnight, New York time. There it is trained on my videos, some of my premium content, and it gets you about 80% of the way there. It does not replace me, but it's way better than ChatGPT. Will get you about 25% of the way there. So definitely worth investing in. If you have lots of questions, like you guys who show up on these live streams, it's great that I can also feed in my answers and train the AI on it as well, the New York Insider AI. So definitely it's going to be a lot of benefit to many of you that you can go 24/7, just ask a question. And while it's not like having me, getting on a call with me, it's pretty damn close. So go invest in that down below. This offer of 29 euros per month is until Monday, midnight, Eastern Standard Time. Let's go and look at your next comments and questions. Transnistria is done, says Best. Russia cannot support it, and locals are interested in better prospects. 100%. Unless the Russian troops conquer this region and get to join up with them, that place is going to eventually just reintegrate into Moldova. Its economy is in tatters. It's a disaster for the local people there. Most of them are now immigrating out of the place. The population, no one really knows how many people are left. It's a very old demographic that stays there and relies on remittances. So yeah, for the local people, they should just reintegrate and have a better future. It used to be way wealthier than the other parts of Moldova. Now it has a GDP per capita of around, is it 25% or 30% of the rest of Moldova? It's a basket case, basically, economically. Jeff says, being seeing some moves with Belarus releasing some political prisoners. Don't trust Lukashenko. What do you see any change happening there? Well, Lukashenko is pro-Lukashenko. So he's going to do, I mean, he flipped back to supporting Ukraine if he thought he could get away with it and keep him in power longer. So he's releasing the political prisoners, which keeps his hostages, basically, to be able to trade them to get some of the sanction relief, because his economy is in trouble because it's so closely tied to the Russian economy, and he obviously faces all these sanctions from European partners, so they can't do the same business. Do I see any changes happening there? No, Lukashenko will stay in power for now. Doesn't look like there's any successful attempt by the opposition to overthrow him or by Russia to unseat him. So I guess he's judging which way, if he plays them. He can play both of them off each other to a certain extent and try to avoid being annexed by Russia, by Putin basically, and at the same time not get invaded by getting too close to the European Union and the West again. So we'll see how that develops. But it's good that some political prisoners are out, at least. Best in class of Moldova should join Romania, not saying an artificial former Soviet SSSR. I don't agree. I discuss it often with my friends from Moldova. Some are in favor of unification with Romania, basically annexation by Romania, because they're already Romanian citizens and they think they'd already be in the European Union, so that's the benefit. It does not have majority support in Moldova. Moldova's culture is different to Romania, even though the majority of Moldovans speak Romanian. A bit like maybe today Austria and Germany. There isn't a groundswell of support to unite. The main reason to unite would be if the Moscow's forces look like they're about to overrun Moldova. Then I could see why they would vote in a very hastily organized referendum to join Romania. But without that, I don't think it will happen, and because there's not majority support. The President of Moldova has said it several times recently in an interview with, what's the name of it? The Rest of the Politics podcast, that she's in favor of unification of Moldova and Romania, but there isn't a majority of Moldovans who will support it. There's like, whatever, 30-40% of the population, somewhere in the 30s, that supports Russia even. And then there's a certain percentage of the pro-EU majority that wants Moldova to be its own country. I think as long as they are not in danger of being invaded by Russia, that they can probably make the 2030 thereabouts target date for joining the European Union. Is only 4 years away. And it would be better for Moldova to actually join as a separate member state. They would have more influence, and yeah, it would mean less strife in the country as well. So I think that would be better, but if it changes, it changes. Should Austria even be a separate country? Was a decision made to separate it out from Germany, to reverse the Anschluss with the Cold War and keep it neutral. Otherwise, yeah, they would have just been part of there could have been another 2 occupation zones, East Austria and a West Austria, and they would have been part of Germany. Just West Germany would have included that part of Austria, and then maybe we'd have had completely different geopolitical situation. So, and then it would have wanted to have united again with Germany at the fall of the Berlin Wall and the end of the Cold War. So, but it's developed a different culture in the meantime, and it's separate. So any more questions or comments? We're up to 2 hours 15 minutes here. Let me just go take a look if there's any more points that I want to bring up. Yeah, I think I've already commented on, I had a point about testimony from Clyne, but I think I've already told that story. And yeah, maybe the last point isn't so valuable in this live stream since we're talking about Estonia and stuff. I think I'll save that last one for a more appropriate time. So, any more questions or comments? Again, the New Europe Insider AI is down below. You can grab that special price until Monday, midnight, Eastern Standard Time. And then you can ask even more questions to the AI. John says he's found a large Ukrainian community in Austin, Texas. Awesome. Sounds great. Austin's a city I never made it to. I made it to Dallas, Texas. I had many memories, fun ones from that trip, but I never made it to Austin, unfortunately. So, I have a friend who's based there, or he owns property there. He's rarely there now. He relocated to Puerto Rico for tax reasons, so I don't spend so much time in Austin anymore. Any more questions about Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania, since that was the main theme, and we start off with a little bit of geopolitics and the situation. I'll also ask about the other countries that I help my clients with, so Poland, Warsaw, Kazakhstan, Astana and Almaty, Chișinău up the road in Moldova, and here in Ukraine. John's got me if I ever come to Austin. Well, I have no plans to go to the US for the foreseeable future, and haven't been there for, I think, 2016. Yeah, 10 years ago last time I was in the US. So, any more questions or comments? Just to remind you, if you're new to this content, you're in an early research phase about this region, you can go to my Insider Resources page. I have a link down below in the description. It's on my website, conorclyne.com/resources. And you can go there. There's some playlists or my guides that you can just invest in for Moldova and Ukraine. And all those are the language programs. The Ukrainian one that I referred to, I have the first module now done. Second module, I'll send it to the beta group this week. And then presumably the week after, we're going to start the live streams for it. You can still get in if you want to learn basic Ukrainian. Also, the Russian program, the legacy program is there as well. If you want to learn Russian, invest that straight away. And yeah, there's lots of useful playlists there where I've broken out by topic so that you can learn a lot from watching those videos straight away. Then, well, newly we have the New Europe Insider AI, which again, special price until Monday midnight, keep saying European Standard, Eastern Standard Time. Also, if you want to jump on a consulting call because you want to get my bespoke advice for the strategy for, as I said at the top of the hour, I help high-level men with leveraging lifestyle arbitrage to get an advantage here in a region I call New Europe. So if you want to have my expertise, just jump on a call and resolve your strategic planning for this region. It can be when there's an edge case about something, or you want something that's quite nuanced and a little bit esoteric, like on the last call when there was questions that were very specific that probably haven't been asked before. So the AI is probably not going to be able to answer it if I've never been asked if it's that obscure. And if you want to have me as your mentor in person, an unforgettable trip to this region up to a week, then you can apply for the New Europe experience. It's my in-person immersion, and the application form is down below. There's also a link to the page to learn more about it, but basically you get to come in person if I think it's a good fit for us to work together. So you'll get access to my network in the city. We'll go out to the best places and party with the amazingly beautiful women. Can't always vouch for their values, all of them, but probably if you are looking for someone who's a little bit more conservative than you on average than you're going to find in the US or Western Europe, probably more likely going to be in this region. They're not traditional women, to be clear. It's not Afghanistan, right? It's maybe like the 1990s in the UK and in the US. Maybe that's a good analogy. Maybe it's really the 2000s at this point. And we will paint the town red, have an unbelievable time, unforgettable time for sure, socializing in the best places with my local crew, if appropriate, and you will have me there. You don't have to worry about getting scammed. That's less of an issue nowadays. If you're coming here to Ukraine, because particularly if you're looking at investing, like my client who came was looking as a place to settle in probably after the fighting, but he wants to do his reconnaissance now and take advantage of the more attractive real estate prices that probably is going to be after the conflict ends. Then we can also discuss coming to Ukraine. Obviously, it's probably going to be more interesting if you're coming to Ukraine because obviously you want to have me there for the safety element as well. And yeah, you don't have to worry about linguistic issues. I got you covered, especially if we're going to Kazakhstan or somewhere, because I speak the local languages in general in the place we go. Definitely most of them to boot. So yeah, down below is the application form. That fill out the application form. If I think it's a good fit for us, potentially work together, we will jump on a very quick strategy call together. Normally it's about 10-15 minutes, and we'll figure out if it's going to work and narrow down the city that would be the most appropriate, and potentially figure out the dates as well. And yeah, that is in general. Over the last 2-3 years, I mean, back in 2021, late 2021, early 2022, I didn't think I'd be bringing clients to Kazakhstan. I guess Moldova was foreseeable because we have been there, but never Warsaw. And we spent so many weekends in Warsaw, less now than before, that I would bring clients to Kaunas, never mind Vilnius or Tallinn and Riga, but Kaunas, unthinkable. So it's funny how life works out. But, you know, with issues like we've had, I mean, before, if you don't know the history of my channel, I had the premier channel for a high-level lifestyle here in Ukraine between 2020 and 2022. Basically, I was here every single day in Ukraine. I didn't leave with the COVID pandemic. And Ukraine was really attractive for relocation at the time because most things were open, cost of living, of course, you're a single guy, beautiful women. There was a lot of scamming going on at the time. So I was helping guys with avoiding that with the Scam Buster program, also with suggestion secrets for how to navigate the dating world. And prior to that, I had basically a socializing, was it, in-person experience because we were primarily going to Belarus, to Minsk, with clients and partying really hard. So it was less focused on relocation. It was actually relocation came from 2020 onwards when my clients started to actually relocate here, especially to Ukraine, especially to Kyiv, a little bit to Lviv. No one ever relocated to Odesa, which still amazes me. But yeah, most of them, about 90% were relocating to Kyiv and about 10% to Lviv. So yeah, the interesting thing about Belarus was guys were finding me because of a lot of the hype about what was misleading about Ukraine, but because I had the insider knowledge, I knew that Minsk was like going through a golden age if you're to go there as a foreign guy and socialize and party, in terms of the model-like beauty and just the craziness. Again, because there's arbitrage opportunity. Very few people were going to Belarus. It was visa-free. If you flew into the airport, it was still a little bit complicated to go there, and a bit more obscure. So there was kind of an information asymmetry. That's what I talk about. And my clients who got on that strategy call when they'd applied for the experience, they got to find out that Minsk was the place to go. And then afterwards, obviously, I made a good bit of content about it. And actually, that information asymmetry started to decline a little bit. We had a little bit of alpha decay towards the end of 2019 because there were a lot more foreign guys coming. But then anyways, we had COVID, and then Lukashenko decided that to clamp down the opposition, and it's just a shadow of its former self. It's really tragic what happened also in Belarus. Best of Belarus has left, and there's hardly any foreign YouTubers even commenting about this. This is like so disinteresting at this point. Yeah, so let me see another comment. Best in class has come to Tartu sometime. Yes, I must go back to Tartu, Estonia's second city at a certain point. I haven't been there for many years. I think it's about a decade since I was actually in Tartu, because when I was there, let me just see, because I keep the camera, it's all good. I was, yeah, it was probably around 2016, I think, when I was there last. On my 4-month stay, I just basically went to Narva. That was the only place I went outside of Tallinn. Yes, because it was winter. Went to Narva, never made it back to Tartu. But I have been there once before. And stopped in Pärnu on the way down to Riga. So for sure I will go to Tartu at some point, probably the next trip when I'm back. Jeff says we're looking at Jormala, but it looks like there may be some places to the north of Riga. I think yours, girl, covered one town. Yes. Also, if you go the opposite direction, you got Sigulda. It's a beautiful part of Latvia with historical city there. It's very nice. When I go back, now the weather's getting good, I have a very attractive friend from Sigulda, because I filmed her and I still didn't make that vlog. But the idea was that if she's free, we'll go to Sigulda and film it and promote it. So yeah, when I get back, I'll be showing you a little bit more of Riga. So Jeff, going to be good for you to see that for sure. Good to see I'm inspiring someone to consider relocation to lovely Latvia. So any last questions or comments, because I'm going to close it out. Let me see whether the drones of Russia clearly didn't send all the, these ones to, attack Americans and in the Gulf and their allies. Let's see where these guys are. Are they coming into the center? I heard a little bit of air defense, but it was quite far away. They were about 5 minutes ago. So I'm just looking. Yeah, it went past out along the coast. So it's in the north, to the north of Odesa. Right in the north. Not even in Odesa, the city, but another town nearby. Oh, that actually, air defense is actually an observation drone it took out. At least that's the claim I see in the Telegram group here. Alright, more questions and comments? No. I'll give it 4 minutes, bring it up to around 2.5 hours on this show, on the Sunday show for New Europe Experience. Sundays are the day I don't go to the gym because my gym is closed. So I have a bit more energy, I guess, because I haven't worked out. But yeah, life goals, fitness goals for 2026. I mean, I just want to gain a little bit more muscle in my arms, personally. But that's about it. I'm not going to stress about it. I'm already pretty fit. Just gaining muscle at 47 as compared to 33 is apparently a lot tougher. But baby steps, still progress. Anything else I had is a note here. We started off by discussing the situation in Narva. If you joined me late, there is a Russian, basically disinformation campaign to lay the groundwork for potential special military operation against the town of Narva, which is on the border with Russia. It's in Estonia, which is part of NATO, which is part of the European Union. And the too long didn't read version is I don't think there's any imminent operation that's being planned. It's more to create an option for Vladimir Putin, maybe some future date to try a seizure attempt, a bit like in Crimea, probably with little green men, and then see what the reaction is from Estonia's NATO allies. Jeff says, thanks again. First live stream. I've been able to join real time, watch the majority of visits. Okay, great. Great to see that you got, fantastic to see that you got such good value out of it, and that there is still an interest in Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. I was a bit underwhelmed when I was spending 4 months there, and I also spent about another month I went to Daugavpils for 2 weeks. The more you haven't come, I even had a consulting call. I had at least 2 consulting calls with one guy, because we've had consulting calls. I think he first booked one in 2018, maybe it was 2019. And he was supposed to come to the Baltic states. We had discussed going in person to Lithuania, which doesn't come, so what to say. I thought the interest would be higher. I think part of the issue is there's no hype around it, because that's my comment about Ukraine back in the day, was there's so much hype around Ukraine because of the dodgy Ukrainian buy business and all the scammers. And of course there's some legitimate, genuine matchmakers as well, but majority of that money was spent on the scam side. But they built up so much about it, and I guess I've been fed to guys, because I also filmed here in Ukraine, but the majority of the business was going to Belarus at the time because of information asymmetry. That's what you got to look for, that you can leverage, that arbitrage, right? And I guess me making the vlogs in Minsk probably reduced that information asymmetry over time. But then at the end of the day, it didn't make any difference because, well, no one's going to Belarus. And no one has been going for almost 5 years, basically. It's not that exciting there. So, yeah, best of Belarus. Belarus, rest in peace. The Belarus that I enjoyed, the golden years of partying in Minsk. Unforgettable. I will take those memories with me to the grave. General says, 2 medical degrees in the US transfer to the European Union with recertification, or would I need to go to school over there? Well, that's such a necessary question that I would have to research, because I know how it works with European qualifications. I know that an American degree, an Irish degree, a European degree, I think you can do it the other way. So there must be a recertification process, but that's something we can research. Yeah, I'm pretty sure you wouldn't need to requalify. I think the issue is if you were to study in, say, Moscow, then you definitely need normally requalification. It's like that was an issue for international students who were in Crimea when it got annexed. It was no longer recognized in Europe, any of the qualifications. So kind of, if they didn't manage to transfer to being in Ukraine physically with that university, with a branch or a similar university, then it was a waste of time for them. Ben is in the house. Let's see, is Portugal dead for relocation? I've not heard anything about. That's a more general, yeah. There's so much hype on the internet with all these like relocation, I call them sovereign man kind of channels. The most famous being Nomad Capitalist or Millionaire Migrant is a guy who reached out to me recently, and now he's fled Dubai and gone to Georgia. I watched 2 videos from him. He did not mention that 20% of Georgia is occupied by pro-Russian forces. And it's on a major geopolitical fault line, and the government is basically captured by Moscow. And there could be a revolution. Russia can maybe attack Armenia at some point using Georgian territory, a bit like Belarus. It can basically could end up on the other side of a new Iron Curtain, and he's only talking about the tax rate. So good luck with that. I hope he doesn't move his family there and then in a bad situation. So bringing it back to Portugal, yeah, I think they just made it harder for people to relocate, and they pushed up the prices. So there I have a little bit of air defense in the background. Not sure if that got picked up on the mic. I still think it's talked about a bit, but I think that's just like in the European Union, just buying real estate and then getting residency has become harder and harder. There are a few programs, Malta still exists, Greece still allows you to do it. Poland, I guess it's hard. None of my clients ever got residency in Poland. think the only people I know were the people who've been in Ukraine and then used the European Union's temporary protection directive, which meant that not just Ukrainian citizens have fled with the invasion, but also foreigners who were resident here. They also were able to get residency. That's valid until 2027, something, March 2027, so still another year. After that, it's not clear what's going to happen. And it may be that they say Ukrainians can come, don't automatically, well, they can't use that law. Maybe they just give them the option, everybody who's there, hey, you need to get a regular residency permit now. And maybe if people aren't there all the time, maybe they lose the residency. I'm not sure what's going to happen. Jeff says, one of the few advantages of being near retirement age, more visa options. Yes, there is more kind of retirement visa options for sure in Europe, where people are interested in you coming to move there. So, yeah, Portugal, I'm pretty sure still exists. Since I don't deal with that region, maybe that's something I should think about. More options in the region. Talk about the Balkans. I think to really know the region, or a place to know about, you can't spread yourself so thin. Then you end up like these channels that basically are like middlemen for people trying to sell you visas and citizenship, basically. Once you get over a dozen countries, you can't really know that much about what it's really like on the ground, because what are you going to do? Spend, like already, if it's 12 countries, the most you can spend in any country per year is 1 month. So, what, you're going to talk about 25 countries and actually know them all? Yeah, you're basing it on other people's experience and stuff you read on the internet at that point. There is this thought, like one other issue with this whole, move to Dubai and then have 6 residencies and 3 passports. Like I can see the value obviously in having dual nationality. And maybe there's a combination of passports that would be good for you depending on your particular situation. This thing you're going around collecting them, especially for countries that could end up in wars and you're a male of military age. Like you want to think it through, like getting a Georgian passport, getting a Serbian passport, getting a Ukrainian passport. Like it's one thing if you're willing to volunteer to fight in a war if there's a war, or be conscripted. If you're fine with that, then it's cool. But these people are normally completely adverse. They don't have any allegiance to any of the countries they go to, whether resident or they get a nationality. They just think it's something they buy as a product and then they get an advantage for it. They don't understand it comes with rights and obligations. Those obligations may be not only paying a very low tax rate, it may be fighting in a war on behalf of the country if they get invaded or there's a situation. So, a special military operation. Again, just to remind everybody, permanent residency holders in Russia are potentially eligible for conscription. That was a big thing that came up a few months ago. And when it was the Vietnam War, US conscripted green card holders. So you need to think it through a little bit. They're not even citizens. Obviously, you become a Russian citizen, then you're eligible for the next very likely mobilization coming probably by December. Jeff says that he thinks that my new Europe concept is spot on. My ex is from Slovakia. That whole Central European area is wonderful. It's been found. Yeah, there isn't as much leverage there in going to Slovakia or Czech like Bratislava. Also, I find Bratislava is a bit boring for me personally. Of course, these things change. You should also make a difference between when you're single versus being in a couple. It may be that a different place suits you. I just think it's really hard to convince a Western European woman or a North American woman to move to Poland. I just think that they see it as lower status. They're not excited, but there's no hype around it. Instagram pics. It's not like saying we're going to move to the Maldives, or who really wants to move to Maldives, or move to Bali. It doesn't have that attraction. I do see a little bit of it though with going to the Balkans, because maybe the weather is better. I'm not sure what it is. Albania, for example, because Americans can get visa free for a year there. But for me, I wouldn't live in Albania personally. Although I didn't have a bad time. It was just, for me, it wasn't so interesting. And people are going there, they're not going to be integrated. And I think another danger with this whole, not be tied to anywhere, be ruthless. Not ruthless, but rootless. And I had a conversation with a guy who interviewed me. and he had gone to actually Almost Capitalist Live and told me that, yeah, he's living in Asia. He's basically bouncing between countries all the time. No kids, same age as me. I don't see the long-term plan, personally. I think you end up risking being a drifter. Not that it's a disaster, not like you're a pauper on the street or something, but yeah, this idea that you're not really tied to anywhere, I think it's a little bit problematic. You lose community. That's why I guess these guys all try to stop communities with expats, because they're basically drifting. So drifter gangs can all hang out together, like the day gamers outside the train station in Warsaw, basically. That's kind of what they're doing, because some of them came up to me. They're basically drifted a bit. Working online, digital nomad, digital drifter. It's not, no long-term relationship, no kids. Like I think obviously if you're in your 20s, you go explore for sure. Maybe your 30s. I just think it becomes a bit problematic. You don't really have any ties anywhere. It has this downsides of it. I obviously understand that if the place you tie your ship to or whatever, or drop your anchor in, to make a maritime analogy, since we're in Odesa, that's the symbol of the city, is an anchor, then yeah, that obviously having a plan B I think is good, like having another place. But it doesn't have to be that elaborate. Like you could have a second apartment in a different country, and you just need to know how to get there and be clued into geopolitics and what's going on. I saw a lot of, I guess people who don't know I'm in the situation probably think it makes sense to them because they trust the authorities saying it, but yeah, I think you need having a separate place to go to, having a separate apartment, a residence, to make sure you can get in, like in case they close the border, like you're a resident. Yeah, I wouldn't want to, like, because I'm an EU citizen, like if I were to buy an apartment in Slovakia, well, I'm not really worried about the Slovaks saying I can't come in. Okay, there might have been some issues with COVID, maybe, would they have let you in? Would they let you travel and you have a place in Slovakia, so you have to hang out outside indefinitely? I don't remember really what happened. But I think if you have a place there and an address, it can't really keep you away from it. I mean, that's very unlikely to happen. So I don't really have to worry so much in Europe. If I were to buy a place in Chișinău, well, I'm right beside it if I had to leave Odesa. If I buy a place in Astana or Almaty, well, first I can't buy without being a permanent resident, so that's kind of a moot question in that sense. So I'd already be resident. Anywhere outside the European Union where else I go to. Yeah, there's nowhere else outside the EU that I have my clients with. I don't recommend Georgia. I think the food is great. I love the Georgian food. Climate is probably pretty good, but the geopolitical situation, I'm just not interested in going there. Plus, if you're single, I think Georgia's a terrible idea. It's just like the culture's way too traditional, just to use that term that the whole marriage agency business throws out. They're actually more traditional, but you don't see the marriage agency pitching them because they're actually more traditional. Like they're not going to run off at any Tom, Dick, and Harry for immigration purposes. So, yeah, I think it's complicated being single there. But there's a place you could go in a couple for a while. I see that my Belarusian ex, who is in the videos for 2019, she became a mom, and she lives in Georgia, in Batumi. Yeah. So I wished her congratulations on her child. Nice to see. But she was in the videos in 2019. Oh, I see a bit of air defense. Nice. So I might end this shortly. Let me see. Let me go to the next question. Jeff says his daughter and son are psyched. His daughter's 20. Will give the locals in Latvia a run for the money. Nice to hear that. Importing some family beauty. Ben says networks and community is everything. It's how you meet people, find info, and find opportunities. Yes, you need to step. That's when we had our vodcast together, Ben. It was like, come in and set up your network now. That's the thing. Get ahead of the crowd. Get first mover advantage, basically. But again, you're leveraging, an arbitrage opportunity by having a network that then you can leverage later on, right? So that's very important. That's why I build it up. I had a discussion with another influencer. He's saying doing all this stuff, This is the guy who accused me of modern Maxine. But I think all these things, like, it's not just about dating either. It's going to be a big help in dating, but it's also going to help in just lifestyle in general, information, asymmetry. You're going to get to know what's going on in the city and get those local tips and possibly do business with people you meet. There's just a lot of advantages to it. So I like to, I mean, I do have friends who are foreigners who hang out in these places, but I also know locals. I think it's good to have a mix because maybe you can relate to the foreigners. They have similar situations. They give you tips if you're not from this, because you have, you've come from somewhere else. But also you gotta know, befriend locals who are going to be cool to hang out with as well. Josh is in the house. Wouldn't mind having an anchor in Odesa and drifting. Yes. Yeah, I think it's good to, like, the weather, this is not the region for beautiful, for sunny weather in the winter, although it's sunny enough here, it's not too bad. But it's not the region for tropical weather, and definitely not in the winter, so you can go off. I used to love going to Brazil for 1 month of the year in the winter here in Europe. So that's good. And have an idea of a place you could go to that's less likely to be affected by a geopolitical event that would maybe affect your main base. I think it's pertinent, right? So if I had to leave Europe, where would I go? I'd almost certainly go to, I don't know, almost certainly, because I haven't been in Brazil for a decade. Well, Brazil will be tempting. Where else would I go? And I can go visa-free, at least at the moment. So that would be a plan B if I want to leave Europe. Somewhere like Brazil, I just love Brazil. A lot of people are talking about Paraguay and Uruguay. I found them a little bit too tame for me. Same with, I didn't like Argentina as much. So for me, it'd probably be when I go to Brazil. I guess that's the thing. But that could also be affected by geopolitical events in an era where we just have a lot more war. I don't think Latin America is going to be immune to it at all. Probably the most sensible thing to do would be to go somewhere like New Zealand, somewhere in that part of the world, where you don't have a local population that might lynch you. Like it. I think Maoris and white New Zealanders are pretty much reconciled. There isn't so many issues. Probably Australia, the same thing. So it's probably not going to happen. But if you go to one of these islands in the Pacific, where you're going to be a minority, minorities are sometimes attacked, like in the Solomon Islands when the Chinese community got basically a pogrom against them a few years ago. So, yeah, you want to also just think about that if really things go crazy, probably somewhere in that region is probably going to be one of the safest. But just be carefully. But I think Nomad Journalist there understands where I'm coming from about the digital drifting and some of the advice online from people who are pushing the Middle East quite heavily only a few years ago. I'm pushing the Balkans very heavily only a few years ago. I'm pushing Georgia very heavily only a few years ago. And now, like if you listen to them, you'd had 5 residencies and 3 passports from countries that might conscript you at the moment. And property that just collapsed 30% in value. So, yeah, it's complicated, obviously, to predict these things and to foresee everything. But, yeah, you need to have some mitigation, right, or some risk diversity. But having it so much, you're going to overcomplicate your life at a certain point. So, a few different plans in your head, one main base, and then a second, temp base. Like, I think that's basically what you have, right, Josh? So I think that's good already. But I guess these kind of channels have to sell you constantly, basically, so as middlemen for all these services. So they're not really talking about integrating anywhere either, which is another issue. So I remember there's a channel that was promoting Paraguay, saying that that's the way it will go, that it'll be focused on integration in one place, but we'll see. I guess there's still a market for kind of, digital drifting and basically being a nomad to a certain extent. Another thing in dating, being a digital drifter or the nomad, it's not very attractive. It's actually a bit of a negative with women. Women prefer, on average, it's not going to be everything, of course you're going to have exceptions, but they'd rather that you're actually grounded and focused on at least one or two places, not be gallivanting off every 2 months to a different part of the world. It's exciting for a fling, but not for a long-term relationship in general. Unless she's into the same thing, but that's going to be a very small minority of women, especially when it comes to having kids. Jeff says, what were the Botox like during COVID? Botox was more on the page in Sweden. I'm not sure what you mean by the Botox. I was more on the page of Sweden than I think you mean there's the restrictions. Yeah, here there were very few. First month, 6 weeks, things were closed because people know what it was. But then after that, they closed it by oblast. They put in restrictions. So if you were flexible, this is about having a plan B. Go and spend time in another oblast if they really closed everything down in your city. And then that's it. Your city would open up again a month later. So I didn't have too many problems. I just used an opportunity to go and document. I remember I went to Dnipro once because I was annoyed. I went to go use the metro in Kiev, and they said, no, only certain people. And I couldn't sit in my favorite restaurant. I had to like take it away. So I was like, screw this. I'll just go to Dnipro for a few weeks. So I went there and I filmed the vlog and everything at that time. So Jeff says, how were the Baltics during the COVID? I don't remember. It wasn't really on my radar, Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia at the time, so much for relocation, but they had significant lockdowns for sure, like everywhere in the European Union. Glee Smee says, outside the EU for you, Northern Ireland, no brainer. Haha, cheap property, couldn't refuse you entry. Yes, but that's fine, yeah. Actually, Irish citizens can basically live with no restrictions in the United Kingdom anyways. So you don't even need British nationality. A nice wee place on the Ulster Riviera. I like the way you said the Ulster Revolutionary. Port Rush, Port Stewart, somewhere like that. Port Stewart. I can't do good accents. Port Rush I've been to because there is still probably a car racing circuit that I used to race at when I was semi-professional race car driver. That was in my youth, but I didn't make it all the way to Formula One, so that's why I ended up being a lawyer. But and then ultimately here on YouTube, helping high-level guys with leveraging lifestyle arbitrage to get ahead. Get ahead. Life isn't fair when you have information asymmetry and barriers to entry that can be overcome in different ways to give you an advantage. So you can succeed in, lifestyle, relocation, dating, and business in this region I call New Europe. But it's good that it's come up that some of you have spent time or have experience in Central Europe more than, we could throw Poland in with that. It's kind of a little bit the outlier in a sense, but it's mainly what made it enjoyable from a social point of view and still are the Ukrainian and Belarusian diaspora spots. I think without that, we wouldn't have half as much fun. And I wouldn't think it'd be anywhere near as attractive for my client base to be there. But there's no guarantee that there'll be continuously more Ukrainians and Belarusians coming, because now the Belarusians have been there. Some of the Belarusians now have already moved on to other parts of Europe. So, I think they'll become more and more dispersed. So you won't have the concentrations like you have at the moment. And obviously, if you want to come to Ukraine, if you're one of the guys saying, I'm going to come after the war and you think that it's going to be easy the dating, forget it. It's going to be a lot more difficult than that. That's for sure. And lifestyle where you don't have to deal with the air alerts and the air defense that I've had on this live stream, that's one plus. But you're going to have tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of horny foreign men showing up again on the shores of the Black Sea. That's for sure. So if you want to compete with them, then I guess you can wait. Otherwise, but I'm preaching to the choir to a certain extent, because I know a lot of you who are on the live stream have already been to Ukraine in the last 4 years. That's another interesting thing about the Ukrainian buy business. Not that I want to talk about the matchmaking, but very few of them have actually been here in the last 4 or 5 years. And they're rambling on about, of course, the traditional women that, sure. But the thing is, they cannot really relate to what is happening in Ukraine, because first we have a war, or a hot war, and second of all, they haven't been here, so they can't understand societal change in the last 5 years. Like, for example, the fact that Ukrainian is a lot more widely spoken now in southern and central Ukraine than it was 5 years ago. You can speak in Russian, but it's more or less bilingual rather than Russian majority. Like in Odesa, not so many people would walk up and order in Ukrainian. It was very rare because the lingua franca of the city, main language was Russian still. But now, yeah, I mean, I think I mainly speak in Ukrainian, basically. Yeah. I normally greet people in Ukrainian, and then most reply in Ukrainian, minority reply in Russian. I don't really want to get in a language battle. I'm fine with speaking Russian, but yeah, I obviously need to practice my Ukrainian. It's more benefit for me to speak Ukrainian anyways, or to speak Russian. So unless it's really important and I mightn't understand Ukrainian, I'm just going to speak in Ukrainian. Otherwise, I don't really want to. Don't think the volume of me speaking Russian while I'm in Ukraine. So that goes for the same for information on YouTube. We'll leave Poland aside because there is a lot of YouTube content being created about Poland. Some of it's good, a lot of it's hype and complete BS, but okay, fine. You can find good information, and I'm going to do that interview probably in 2 weeks, or the week after this one, with a YouTuber who's based in Poland, who I think is a good channel, that's accurate, he's married to a Polish woman. And otherwise, there's no good information for a relocation lifestyle in Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia. There's one, I shouldn't say there's none, there's limited. There isn't a channel like this where they're giving you like high level information about spending time there. There's one that the guy doesn't show his face, but he had some good videos about Lithuania. I think it was called Lithuania Explained. That wasn't bad. But it's not, he's not a single guy explaining. So if you're a single guy, which is going to be most of you, then yeah, then you don't really have any good content to watch from Latvia. There was a guy just in Eastern Europe. I've actually met him personally for coffee a few times. He's quite a charismatic guy. He doesn't seem to produce any content anymore, and yeah, he was more the vlog style. So I wasn't really. He was trying about the whole region more. Like he speaks good Russian and some Latvian. He's talking with languages, he's polyglot. He's charismatic and yeah, definitely extroverted. Yeah, but it's more touristic in vibe. I think he wasn't really aiming for people who want to spend a lot of time in the region. So I hope he's okay, because I haven't heard from him for over a year. He doesn't produce very much. And he had some interesting stories to tell me in private. It would actually be an interesting podcast episode to interview him. Something I'll bear in mind when I'm back in Riga. Estonia is absolutely nothing. There's one guy who seems to be from the middle. No, he's Pakistani maybe originally. And he had a different channel until he became a citizen of Estonia. And now he has like, it's for me, it's zero interest in his content. And before he had a little bit about immigrating there, relocating, but he's not a very social guy. He doesn't party. Yeah, he doesn't really seem to socialize a huge amount. And now he just has videos that seem to talk about the Soviet times. It's like irrelevant, almost irrelevant to modern Estonia and living there. And yeah, I don't find it very valuable, but it looked like his channel would be valuable. I left a few comments under his videos to create a connection, and then he changed the content when he became a citizen. And yeah, let's see, Poland aside, there's nothing in Moldova. There are a few local Moldovans channels. I had Anna Maria. She had a channel in Ireland, and then she made a few videos from Moldova, but now she seems to have moved to the Netherlands. So yeah, and there was another girl who had a channel that was providing some good information, but then she emigrated to Luxembourg, so didn't make any videos for a few years. And there was another woman, I think was Ukrainian, who moved there and had a channel in English, but she doesn't seem to make anything either for well over a year or so. I'll have my Chișinău vlog, maybe even next week. We'll see how far along my editor is. So that will be the video of the year, of the last year for going to Moldova. And that's for Ukraine. Johnny FD isn't here. He hasn't been here for a while, all winter, I think. And yeah, the channels are kind of showing you what's happening with the war, because that's what gets views, because so few people are going to relocate to Ukraine. Again, my clients normally have a partner who's Ukrainian if they're coming here, but not exclusively. I think, I have a feeling that starting this summer, just looking at the comments I get, some clients suddenly being interested once again in Ukraine, I think guys are going to start coming back. Say there seem to be a Western European, maybe North American women who are here. I presume with the some aid agency or maybe diplomatic work, but I'll find out if I go for a drink with this Irish guy who approached me in the Irish pub on Paddy's Day. So it'll be good to get the down low on why they're there. I have a feeling this is the time to come back to Ukraine, but of course you got to be okay with the, what you could probably hear in the background, basically. Statistically, not a very high risk level, touch wood. Where's the wood for me to touch? Over there. But I'm not in the wrong place, wrong time. You're not in the wrong place, wrong time if you come. But it's more the psychological impact. Sounds like an aircraft. Not a drone either. So interesting. I wonder, maybe it's going to try and shoot down the drones. Jeff says, better learn Latvian long term than Russian for being around Riga. I would say yes, because if you want to get citizenship after a decade, you're going to have to pass a test in Latvian. And Russian will take, if you don't speak Russian or don't speak another Slavic language, it's going to take you so many years to learn good Russian. And then it won't help you get citizenship. So then you'll end up learning Latvian as well. So you'll end up having to learn both of them. So probably start with Latvian. Although when you're socializing, I discussed it with Paul at the time. We were there in 2023 together. We had some legendary nights out at a club that's now closed, unfortunately. It was like a club on the waterfront area. It wasn't so strict on no tourists, but it basically had a no tourist policy. And yeah, we were discussing whether it would have been as useful to speak Latvian, whether they can actually know for socializing. Because most people we socialized, 75% were Russian speaking, maybe 25% were Latvian speaking. But if you're going to be there long term, probably Latvian is better. Because they all speak Latvian as well, but it's just that you're going to hear a lot of Russian around you. Jeff says, watch Justin's channel. He's a funny guy. Not sure for long-term stays. He's the best info. Yeah, that's what I would say. Also, he doesn't really film luxurious stuff. So, yeah. So if you want to know that end of it, he wasn't really filming it. So that's what I mean. It's kind of more touristic vibe, maybe mid-budget was kind of what he was aiming for. So yeah, that isn't probably what my clientele is looking for in general. Okay, we're up to probably almost 3 hours in this live stream. This show, the Sunday show. Again, New Europe, Insider AI. It's 29 euros per month until Monday, which is tomorrow, midnight Eastern Standard Time. Go and invest in that, and then you can have me, almost like having me 24/7 for all your questions. So, you get a question, you can be doing your research. It's going to be an invaluable tool for sure. And if you want to have my mentorship in person, have an unforgettable up to a week in the city, in the region, you can apply for the New Europe experience. The application form and more information is down below. And it could be you with me. Could be next weekend, quite literally. Well, next weekend I'd probably be good to go to Chișinău, where I had actually intended to be tonight, but me and I've stayed here in Odesa. I might regret that. There was an event I was supposed to go to, but I kind of left it too late. And then I just didn't want to have the hassle of traveling back and forth. And I wanted to see my hairdresser, because I have a great hairdresser in Chișinău. But it's been 4 weeks, so I need to get a haircut. So I might end up just going next week, who knows. Let's see, but I missed the event that I wanted to go to and film it. Damn. Should have been better organized than that. So yeah, in any case, it could be Chișinău, could be Astana and Almaty in Kazakhstan, can be here in Ukraine, been clients since 2022 in Chernovtsi, in Lviv with a few, and here in Odesa with a couple. I haven't been back up in Kiev. I've spoken in some of the live streams. I have a business idea. I need to go to Kiev to get it kicked off. It's kind of like, I like being by the sea in Odesa, and I want to spend the summer between here and Chișinău if possible. Obviously, if clients to go somewhere else, I'll go there for that period. But I think it's going to be a great summer in Odesa, and I've had so much fun, so many great weekends in Chișinău. But I think I want to spend more of it this summer in Odesa. But if I got to do business in Kyiv, I might end up in Kyiv quite a bit. But you know, I'll have to figure it out. If the business idea is working, I guess I got to be a lot up in Kyiv. Maybe I'll be coming down the weekends to Odesa. Split my time. Maybe that'll be my, you know, my split between Kyiv and Odesa. Let's see. Okay, yeah, I was saying Poland, there's a lot of content, but a lot of hype misdescribing the country. A lot of hype, but there is a lot of content there, so you can probably, in conjunction with going to Poland and figuring out who's telling you the truth and not. And as for Kazakhstan, there's almost nothing. Forget it. There's like one terrible passport bro went there and probably ruined the reputation of black men and American men. So he was quite vulgar and pretty got in fights with Kazakh men and stuff. So yeah, he's definitely, just to add to why you shouldn't be a passport bro and why I made that video. Probably can't, not only should you not go to Poland and the Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia for a passport, probably don't go to Kazakhstan at this point, because this guy. And then, well, I guess here in Moldova, no one, there's just so few people coming that it's probably fine. The price point would be closer to passport bro level, that's for sure, in Ukraine. But again, we've had a little bit of inflation. You know, Russia has quite significant inflation that, of course, you'd be thrown in prison basically if you talk about openly on YouTube, since most of them seem to try to deny that it exists. But yeah, here we also have it. But I don't need to worry about that because we're in Ukraine. I can talk about the inflation rate. I can say the weather is bad. I think half these move to Russia crowd, I think they're even scared to criticize the winter weather. You have to talk about, well, you know, it has a charm. No, Moscow in the winter, especially then when it melts, it's bloody awful, the weather, just objectively. Like, no one enjoys it. I don't care, unless you're a lunatic, that you enjoy that kind of weather. I mean, I like the changes of the seasons, but that weather, no, it's like terrible. It's something that I'm fine with living through. I would prefer to go away for a month and then come back again. But anyway, as I was saying, the inflation rate, yes, things have gone up about 15% last few months for a lot of the things that I see. Same in supermarkets, restaurants, yeah, everything has gone up a bit. And now we have a huge spike in the oil prices, so let's see for how long that lasts. Anyways, lads, do we have final questions? Final questions for this evening's show. Lisa, am I correct that you are not a fan of Montenegro? Too sleepy? I bet there will be some people relocating there from Dubai this year. Yeah, it's quite small and small-minded. That's kind of my issue with Montenegro. So I think the locals, it's not so open. Beautiful places. I was in Kotar, I was in, where's Tivat? I was in, or is it Tivat? I'm not sure what the stress is on it. What's the other one? Budva. So yeah, it was very beautiful. It's very touristic. I think as a single guy, I remember the time I went to the best nightclub in the region, and it was, I actually thought I made a mistake when I went in. I was like, I must have come into the wrong place. I was like, no, this is it. I was like, oh my God, people hype this place up so much. And I'd already just been in Ukraine. I was like, man, this is like a town of 50,000 people. I have something better. So, but that's probably improved. Yeah, it's a bit too sleepy. One of my clients went there in 2022 in the summer, and I was quite skeptical it would work out, and unfortunately it's proven correct. He just didn't. Yeah, it was very underwhelming, and he was single. And basically he was flying in Ukrainian girls to come hang out with him after a while because so little was happening with the Serbian and Montenegrin girls, because a lot of Serbian girls come down the weekend apparently. But yeah, he was very underwhelmed by the whole thing. Well, the proof in the pudding is he didn't go back there. From like, oh, he became a citizen. That's the ironic thing. He did come back. He came back to pick up his passport and to get the document he's a citizen for like about a week. And then I didn't get the impression he was planning to come back at all, ever. because he has a property there. That's how he got this program is ended, but he applied for it just before and bought the property. So I guess maybe if he has to do something with property, maybe he'll come back. But I think the impression he was ever planning to return, even though he's a citizen. So yes, I have a Montenegrin client. Became Montenegrin. Josh says that Montenegro is so beautiful. Yes, it's beautiful for nature. So I think a romantic trip in a couple to Montenegro. Spend some weeks there. It can be a long trip, but yeah. Would we made a vlog, me and Angela, if we come there, with the war and stuff. Yeah, I guess it would have been interesting to go in those days. But what's the arbitrage opportunity in going to Montenegro? Taxes? Price of property? I don't think there's massive arbitrage there. If you're a single guy, I don't see... Again, it's probably better than hanging out in Brighton, or... Brighton's probably pretty nice, but a lot of foreigners go there, I guess, to the UK. But could you have a similar experience if you just went to Costa del Sol? Would it be more fun going to Balearic Islands? Like, what's the arbitrage opportunity on Montenegro? Architecture is also nice in lots of parts of Spain and Italy. Price point, it can't be that much cheaper. It was not that cheap even a decade ago in Montenegro. Ben says there's no internet in Russia. I think it's just in parts of Moscow there's no internet. Let's not get too carried away. But yeah, it's suspicious. It's been like a week to have these issues. So looks like Putin's preparing to make a very unpopular decision. Probably going to be that they're going to have a mobilization. Maybe he'll wait and see what happens with the oil price, because now it's high. So maybe he can just not do a mobilization, actually use that windfall of money to pay people exorbitant amount of money to go die for his glory on a wet and dreary field in eastern Ukraine. What a way to go out. But that's a possibility. So yeah, that's what it looks like. Plus also the throttling of Telegram, throttling of YouTube. I'll probably try to eliminate VPN soon as well, I guess. And then they can create, yeah, more authoritarian state, even more. I mean, it's pushing towards totalitarianism in Russia. But hey, the Move to Moscow crowd going to tell you what's really happening. You should move because all these things are amazing. There are no gay people holding hand in Moscow, at least not in public. Wow. So that's why you should live in a place where the government can read all your messages. You live in a police state. You can be even conscripted and forced to go die in a field in Ukraine for Putin's glory without being a citizen, just by being a permanent resident, apparently. And maybe that will even be expanded, especially those people who took the shared values visa, because that is a defector visa. So at a certain point, they may decide, at a certain point, Putin can wake up in the morning and just sign a law saying, all those people have got to go and die first, rather than, because people in Moscow care less about them than they care about another Muscovite. So, gotta get on Max. Yes, because that's what I really need, is the FSB to be able to read all my messages. It's like, I don't use Yandex, even when I'm in the countries that it's still, because, yeah, I do not want any connection if possible. But it's kind of hard nowadays with the phone to be completely not traceable by any of these intelligence agencies. But I also don't want to contribute, if possible, any money towards the Russian state, since the annexes, you see, acquired by the Moscow madman. All right, final thoughts, comments, questions. Your thoughts about also the region, the greater region, what we've discussed in terms of geopolitics today with the Narva Republic, information campaign by the Kremlin, presumably. Any of my other points about lifestyle in this region. Okay, I think I'll wrap it up then, because we've had 3 hours. The Sunday show has a bit of a ring to it, the Sunday show with Conor. Live from Odesa on the shores of the Black Sea. And yeah, I'm going to have a little bit to eat. enjoy the firework display maybe later on when I can see some air defense in action. And yeah, enjoy the perks of being in Ukraine. Being a little bit facetious with that at the end, but you get my drift. This is a region where there is a lot of arbitrage opportunity. It's obviously fits someone who is has a bit of a higher risk profile, geopolitically for sure. But there's obviously ways to manage that and mitigate it. And not everywhere is under air attack like here in Odesa, but obviously you can go to Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, Moldova, Kazakhstan, and you don't have those issues. And you get some of the perks, and you can take advantage of the information asymmetry because it doesn't get hyped up, with the exception of Poland. And so there, I recommend hanging out. At least this is what I do with my clients, at least the last 5 or 6 of them. Before that, we were going to a lot of Polish places, and I had the network. At the end of the day, I don't think it makes so much sense. It's better to go to the Ukrainian, Belarusian spots when you're in Warsaw, in my opinion, at least from my client base. And then the others, yeah, we have no one goes to Moldova, hardly anyone goes to Kazakhstan, so you can take advantage and leverage the lifestyle arbitrage that these places can afford you. And in terms of lifestyle, obviously dating is the part of the world where on average the women are the most beautiful, and possibly the values are going to suit you more than a radical feminist, blue-haired woman from the United States who may be also high risk and obese or overweight or something. Not something you find in abundance here. You find the opposite in general, so that could be a better fit for you. And cost of living, price point, you get better value for your money. It's not in general super cheap, although Ukraine is a good bit cheaper because, in part because of the wartime situation and the currency going down in value. And yeah, there are just a lot of opportunities. This is a part of the world that is on the way up economically. I mentioned that now for the first time, more Poles are leaving Germany and going back to Poland than actually emigrating from Poland to Germany. It's the same phenomenon in Ireland as well. There's a lot more Poles going back than coming to the country, even though Ireland's doing really well economically. It's just that Poland's catching up. So you're getting into a part of the world where you can invest and invest part of your future. It doesn't mean that you have to relocate, only live here. And you can definitely set up as a base and take advantage of the opportunities here and do a lot better in life in general. But again, there is a little bit more geopolitical risk. Although the way things are going with Dubai, seeing huge geopolitical issues in the last month, maybe this is the new normal and this place relatively isn't so risky as it seemed 6 months ago. So leave it on that note. Slava Ukraini, Rom Slava, and yeah, hopefully Narva in Estonia doesn't face the same situation as Ukraine has done since 2014, but subjected by Moscow's imperial ambitions and the personal desire of Vladimir Putin to be a new Tsar. So I trust that we won't see, it's very unlikely we're going to see a similar situation in Narva in the next few months for sure. And I'll see you on the next live stream. Probably I'm still going to be here in Odesa next week, so I'll do another live stream on Sunday at the same time, probably for the same duration. Slava Ukraini, Horom Slava, do peremоги. From Odesa, Mama.